One does not simply walk into Mordor. Its black gates are guarded by more than just orcs. There is evil there that does not sleep. And the great eye is ever watchful. It is a barren wasteland, riddled with fire and ash and dust. The very air you breathe is a poisonous fume. Not with 10,000 men could you do this. It is folly.
Be the Fellowship of the Ring.
Right. Where are we going?
Good evening and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 174th take. Live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star Studio of Euless, Texas. I'm your host, Barry Duplessis, as always, and I'm so proud, so pleased, and so privileged to be with you all tonight. This is going to be a fantastic show. It comes in pints. We're all excited. You should be too. I've got two gentlemen that are just raring to go on tonight's subject. It is a story of the ages. It is a show for the ages. Am I overplaying it? Well, it wouldn't be a take if I wasn't it. So, but before introductions, we do have to thank the people that make this show possible. That, of course, is our sponsors. Tonight's show is sponsored by Drew Estate. This year marks speaking of anniversaries, this year marks the 25th anniversary of Drew Estate and the rebirth of the Cigars movement. To celebrate this momentous occasion, the company is inviting you, the consumers, retailers, and cigar media alike, to its epic blowout birthday bash entitled DE25. DE25 will be held on September 25th at the South Fork Ranch in Parker, Texas. That's just a stone's throw away from where myself and one of my guests reside today. The DE25 celebrate will include the unveiling of Drew Estate's newest brands with a first-to-experience approach for consumers and trade partners together. Buy your tickets today at drewestate.com/DE25. That's drewestate.com/DE25. And welcome, everyone. Without further ado, we are celebrating something very special tonight. It's my pleasure to welcome in my two guests, sponsored by United Cigars. Smoke one today. Start living united. Mr. Sam Spencer and Tripp Waldrop. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
Fantastic. Well, doing great. Very excited for the show.
Well, I am excited as well, gentlemen. I am excited as well. But just remember, just because this is going to be fun, we have to remember the serious nature of tonight's show, because one does not simply walk into Mordor. Its black gates are guarded by more than just orcs. There is evil there that does not sleep, and the great eye is ever watchful. It is a barren wasteland riddled with fire and ash and dust. The very air you breathe is a poisonous fume. Not with 10,000 men could you do this. It is folly. Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome. It is the 25th or 20th anniversary of Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. I am so excited for tonight's show. We are doing it. It's all about all you Tolkien. What I don't even know what they're called. Tolkien freaks out there. This is the show for you guys. So, gentlemen, we have to get started with tonight's show, and we do have a special thing that we're going to talk about in just a second. But I kind of want to flip the script here. I want to talk about initial experiences with this film, because I mean, 20 years ago, and looking back, can you believe that this film is 20 years old? Let's pose that question.
I cannot. It's I feel like I'm having a midlife crisis right this moment. Like it just started 5 minutes ago. And that's how I feel.
You gonna go out and buy a sports car now, or what?
Yeah.
Or you're gonna go out and buy like pieces of set from the film. That's
something like that.
That's
like
the midlife crisis.
I just feel like my imminent mortality like hit me immediately when you said 20 years.
It's nuts, right? It's crazy. Like, I mean, I remember watching this in the theater, which we'll go into in just a second. But I mean, it was an experience like no other. But I mean, did you watch this in the theater, Tripp?
I saw it 3 times when I was 17. That's like an entire day of watching movies, like split up over the course of a couple weeks, but that's like 12 hours almost.
That's pretty insane. Like,
yeah,
3 times. I mean, there are a few movies that I went and saw multiple times in the movie theater. This wasn't one, but this was very special to me in terms of like theater going. Like I said, I'll get into it in a second. But for our next guest, Sam Spencer, Micallef Cigars. Sam, we do this to you a couple of times tonight, just like we did last time we had you on talking about films. But I mean, I just think it's absolutely transcendent how the last films that we've talked about, Gladiator being a few months ago, and then Lord of the Rings now, but how much it's transcended time, because you were 4 years old when this movie came out.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like I went to the theaters and saw a PG-13 movie when I was 4. I was much older than that, but I feel like I just grew up with this movie.
How old were you when you first saw it? I mean, if you can recall, yeah.
Oh, that is a great question. I do remember that the first Lord of the Rings movie I saw was The Two Towers. I saw that before Fellowship because that's just what was shown to me as a child. Because when you're a kid, it doesn't matter. You don't have to watch movies in order when you're a kid. It doesn't. You don't care.
Yeah, enter Star Wars. Yeah, totally fine.
Oh, exactly. But I was like blown away by what all was happening. Like I'd never seen anything like it before. And then I went back and was like, well, I want to know what's actually going on because this doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. And the Fellowship just sets the stage for what, in my opinion, was 2 unbelievable movies in Two Towers and Return of the King.
So did you see them in that order? Two Towers, Fellowship, and then Return of the King?
Yes.
Okay. That's they I saw them actually in order, but I was really late to the Lord of the Rings party, and I'll explain why. Because when I first saw this had been in the theaters for a while, and I actually went to the Dollar Theater to watch this. But nevertheless, the Dollar Theater, Sam, was something that also old people we would wait for movies to be out for a while because there weren't DVDs yet. And we would go and watch the movies after they'd been out for a while for cheap.
To be fair, this movie had to be like the tail end of Dollar Theaters. Like right around the time this movie came out is when I never saw a Dollar Theater again, because DVDs were pretty prevalent at this point. In the VHS age, it was very different than the DVD age.
Well, yeah, because what we'll talk about is the fact how the 3 of us kind of prepped for this show. The version of this movie that we watched was, I mean, that was the big thing back then, was when the DVD got released. But yeah, I went and saw this in the Dollar Theater, and went and saw it with my sister. My older sister, Reagan, who hopefully she's watching. She said she would, but that's okay. If she's not, that's fine too. She can catch this on the replay. But, she introduced me to this film, and she introduced me kind of to this world. And that became our tradition. For the next 3 years, we went and saw the Lord of the Rings film that got released. Each holiday, I believe it was about the holiday season, right? And then when The Hobbit came out, we did the same thing. And even in between those 2 series, we would always find something to go to, almost every holiday season while we lived virtually, somewhat in the same region and everything like that. It was a great tradition. So gentlemen, what I would like to do tonight is I would like to dedicate this show in honor of my older sister, who is a artist in her own right. Now she's not a sculptor, she's not a painter or anything like that, but she does work in the world of art. She actually works for the Whitney Museum of Modern Art in New York City.
Whoa.
Yeah. And she used to work for the Dallas Museum of Art, used to work for the Met in New York as well. How I'm related to her, we're still trying to figure that one out. Ancestry.com is going to get back to us. The world of art is something she opened up my eyes to. We're not just talking about things that you find hanging in a museum, but also like I never would have gone. It's scary to see. Probably I wouldn't say never, but I wouldn't have gone. I wouldn't have seen this film as early as I did without her, and I wouldn't have gotten out of as much out of it without her. I wouldn't have read the books without her. She got me into reading. I never used to like to read as a child. I never really enjoyed it until she was that's all she did. She was a huge bookworm, and she really pushed me to that. And she pushed me to open my mind in a lot of different arenas and a lot of different ways. And I feel like I'm as well-rounded of an individual as I am, in large part because of the influence of my older sister. So so tonight I'd like to dedicate this show in honor of her. And so as every show since for the last few months, we're dedicating this show to her, but we're also going to honor her by raising some money. And all proceeds are going to go to the Whitney Museum. So I'm posting the link inside the show notes, and they'll be in the chat here in a moment when I stop talking. But I think a lot of people forget that there are a lot of different types of art. We enjoy music, we enjoy film, we do go to museums. Not probably as much as we should, but we do. And so art is one of those things that we need to enjoy more. And so the only way to do that is through nonprofit organizations like great museums like the Whitney and all over this country. So that's what we're doing tonight, boys.
Awesome. Good choice.
Oh yeah, it sounds very fitting for this show.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to, so we were talking about reading the book a little bit. So I confessed to Sam when we were talking about this, I haven't written for 18 years. Tripp, I'll let you go in a second. Sam, when was the last time you read the books?
Oh man, I believe it was 8 years ago.
I was going to say, if you said last
I
week,
recently
laugh, but
no, I recently reread The Hobbit about a year ago. But The Lord of the Rings, it's between 8-9 years probably.
So after rereading The Hobbit and from your memory from 8 years ago, what did you like better in terms of the read?
In terms of the read, I mean, for one, The Hobbit is way shorter. I remember enjoying The Hobbit because I read it before the movies came out. And when you read the book before the movie is a different experience.
Yeah.
Because you're judging it based on the book rather than just the movie. Because of that, I'm going to say The Hobbit. The Lord of the Rings, like, it's such a long journey across Middle Earth that it's in that first book, you're like, man, are they ever going to stop walking?
Well, like in the first book, the movie appears to take place in a fairly short time frame. If I recall correctly, the book, like the course of the first movie is like 25 years.
It's something in the neighborhood of that. Like, I think like when you look at the collection of the three films, and I think they even say it at the end of Return of the King. I'm sure someone can fact check me on this, but it's made to understood, or it's said that it was like 12 months. It was like a year.
Yeah.
It was like a year. And I think the actual saga itself was definitely more than 10 years. I think it was kind of Iliad-esque,
I was reading today that when I might be getting ahead of ourselves talking about like what happens in the movie and stuff, but when Gandalf basically he makes Frodo put the ring in that envelope and he's like, I gotta go figure out what the deal is with this thing, and leaves, and then goes and gets in the fight with Saruman. That's like 18 years in the book that he's gone.
Yeah, where essentially he's captured what we see is for 18 minutes of screen time, he's captured
Yeah.
on the top of the tower. He's gone for
Yeah,
like
exactly.
25.
That's
Yeah, okay.
that's 18 years of time in the book, apparently.
That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I think that makes sense, especially for today's generation and stuff. I think it's really hard. Like I think the concept of, like I just mentioned the Iliad a moment ago. Like the
Mhm.
concept of the Iliad is so far-fetched that something would take years upon years upon years. For Ulysses is gone for years, and
Yeah.
for his wife to remain faithful and to hold the fort down, for his kingdom to still be whole in that amount of time. I mean, there's just so many things that are, to this day and age, just don't seem like it could transpire logically. So I mean, the films are already long enough. I mean, how could you could play out the
I mean,
25 years in film?
I mean, I don't think they need to. I just think it's interesting that you don't perceive a major passing of time during the movie, during any of the movies. Like things are happening, but it doesn't feel like time is just passing and lives are going on. It feels like everything's happening at once. So I just find it interesting that the book is too realistic, like too granular with time.
Yeah, I think that I mean certainly the 18 years of Gandalf being gone would have been, I mean, his weariness would have made much more sense. He's up there for like a day and he looks like he's been in prison for like 18 years, and you're like, dude, like, come on, man, figure it out. Let's figure out a way to get out of here. Turn that frown upside down, Mr. Gandalf the Grey. We got to figure this shit out. The end of the world is coming. So, but I kind of wanted to jump into this first segment here. So first of all, okay, I want grades, gentlemen. I want brutal honesty here. So I did not go with the Sean Bean accent. I didn't want to just make a total fool of myself. But how did I do? How did I do on the soliloquy?
I say 2 thumbs up. You did good.
Oh, yeah.
Two thumbs up.
I loved it.
Okay, I think you guys were being a little generous, but that's okay. If you want to suck up to the host, that's totally fine. I love that speech. I know it's like doom and gloom, and it's also Sean Bean, but like, I absolutely love that speech, and it's like forever immortalized in like memes. It's like the
Mhm.
so. Okay, so Sam, I don't know about this. Are you a fan of Game of Thrones?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
maybe not the last season, but yes.
Okay, so I have no idea what that means because I haven't really watched it.
Oh, really?
But I know Tripp is a fan of the show too. So okay,
Yes.
all right. So speaking from two experts of both worlds here, like, what is the better use of the meme? Is it the one does not simply walk into Mordor, or winter is coming? Brace yourselves, winter is coming. Meme.
One
Which
does not simply walk into Mordor. Wins hands down for me.
Yeah,
Yes.
one does not simply walk into Mordor is much better.
It's so much more precise than brace yourselves. X is coming.
So secretly today I was hanging out with my family, and secretly, when I say secretly, it was just a game that I was playing inside my head. I was trying to incorporate as many lines from the film in just everyday conversation with my kids who haven't seen it, and my wife who's seen it, I think, a couple of times. And so my son, in perfect timing today, he's like, we were trying to get home and because he wanted to play in the playroom with his Legos and all this other stuff. And he was like, Daddy, we're going to be late. And I said, oh no, son, we're going to arrive precisely when I intend to. So, and I think my wife got it. She chuckled at me just because she knows I've been prepping for the show, but it was probably the most perfectly timed line of today. I tried using the one does not simply a couple of times. It just didn't work though. I think you have to have a really good moment for it.
Yeah.
But that brings up the subject of favorite lines of the film. So I have some nominations that you guys are aware of, but before I kind of just blurt out some stuff here, I want to pivot to you guys. So, Sam, when you saw this a little bit later than Tripp and I did, and I mean, you have this and please, when I keep referring to your generation, I really am just impressed that, you know, our love of some of the same films has transcended time in the amount that it has. Like that's where it's coming from. So please don't mistake that. I really want to emphasize that. I'm not
actually
making fun of you.
to that point. Like a specific thing about Lord of the Rings, I feel like there hasn't really been another franchise that's. I mean, it wasn't new, but it was a version of the story that had never been told, basically. But I feel like there's no other film franchise that has aged the way it has, where like it feels like a classic. Most modern movies feel really good at the time, and then they just kind of fade away as time goes on. And Lord of the Rings never has at all.
Mm.
Can you give me an example of?
I will give you an example.
Yeah, there was
let
like
me look
really
at your notes. One
like
of
it
the
was-
other movies, A
Okay.
Beautiful Mind. That's an amazing movie.
Okay.
But most people, I mean, I don't want to speak for Sam. Most people Sam's age that I know have never heard of that movie.
Okay, let's put it to the test. Sam, have you seen or heard of A Beautiful Mind?
I have not. I was looking through that list of, you know, big movies from that year. No, complete blank.
Okay. Okay. All right. So that, I mean, yeah, I think that's interesting. There, Sam and I are actually going to be exploring another film later this year that's around the same age. That doesn't transcend, like, it's no Lord of the Rings. Let's just put it that way in that terms of context. But you know, I think it's just really interesting how these films, Tripp, that were like masterpieces of our day 20 years ago still captivate the mind of someone who was, you know, a much younger child than we were. I mean, we were teenagers. I mean, we were college bound at that point.
My almost 7-year-old watched like 45 minutes of this movie with me. Of the beginning. Of the extended edition. Like,
Oh, wow.
There's not very much interesting stuff going on there. And she was like, I love this movie.
Nice.
But to be fair, they have seen the Hobbit
Wow.
movies because they had to watch those for school a couple months ago. But still, the fact that she was able to watch it for 5 minutes without switching to an iPad is pretty impressive to me.
Nice.
Mhm.
All right, Sam. Well, okay. So putting you on the spotlight here, man. And I know that you've changed up, you've switched off your video for those that who are watching. That you switched off his video just because of just preserving some Wi-Fi and everything, so we have a little bit better connectivity. But so Sam, appreciate you taking one for the team here. But what are some of the your favorite quotes here?
Well, I mean, one does not simply walk into Mordor is classic. It's iconic. It'll probably always be number one. But since you picked it, I got a couple. One by Gandalf, when in doubt, follow your nose. It's classic. This man is completely lost in Moria and just smells that this is the right direction.
That's a good one.
I mean, yeah, considering he was like among 10,000 dwarf carcasses at the time, you have to you have to really appreciate wizardry at that point. I mean, that's just that's some powerful stuff right there. I really like that scene for a lot of different
not like
reasons.
30 minutes earlier, he's like, and not like 30 minutes earlier, he's like, I will be your guide and guide you along the way. And
right.
he's like, I have no idea where I'm going.
I think I smell the way out.
Yeah, like spoiler alert. So like, yeah, 30, it's not even 30. It's like really it's like one of the shortest period of times in the movie, right? Because this is like, especially since we watched the extended edition, it's like 3.5 hours, right? It's like 8 minutes of movie time have elapsed when I will be your guide, Frodo. And he's like, oh, fuck, I'm lost. And, and then he abandons them. So bravo Gandalf. Now, don't get us wrong. I mean, he sacrifices himself for the greater good, and that's something else. But I mean, yeah, he really kind of failed on that initial proclamation at the Secret Council meeting, didn't he?
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, so Tripp, what's a pick of yours?
I mean, there was a lot to choose from, but I had to choose one of the scenes that is. I forgot this line was in the movie, and it's hilarious. When they finish talking in Frodo's hut, and Gandalf goes to leave, and Samwise is outside and like gets knocked over by the door, and he goes, "Have you been eavesdropping?" And he goes, "I ain't been dropping no eaves, sir. I promise."
And then the follow-up line where he's like,
Hilarious.
I was trimming the verge, if you know what I mean, like
Yeah,
trimming the hedge, if you know what I mean, or something like that.
it's something like that. Trimming the hedge, trimming the lawn. It's something. He was like,
Yeah.
I was just doing garden work in the middle of the night. That's all. I wasn't dropping a single eve.
I was not dropping a single leaf, sir. Sam's one of those is probably the most one of the most unfortunate characters in this movie, actually in the whole series, right? Like he's been the butt of so many jokes over 20 years. Like there's, but I mean, does the movie go without him? Like, does it like, I mean, there's so many times where I find like Frodo is kind of like at this like crux in the road and Sam's like, come on, let's go. Like, just like this blundering idiot that's just like, hey, we've got this mission and I'm not going to leave you because I made this promise like, a year ago.
I think that's a really good point because I don't know if it's everybody, but Sam drives me fucking crazy. I hate that dude. Like every time he says something, I want to slap him. But this line, notwithstanding, but he's so obnoxiously like, I mean, first of all, he's just annoying, but then he's obnoxiously positive. But the point of that obnoxious positivity is that Frodo would not have kept going throughout all the movies and all of the shit he goes through. He would have given up without Sam there to be like, everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah. Well, I love the part at the end of this film, right, where he's like, Frodo's like, hey, I'm going to Mordor and I'm going alone, and Sam's like, of course you are, sir, and I'm going with you.
Yeah.
Just this, I don't know. He's kind of like, Merry and Pippin are like are the classic fools.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're almost like more like the court jester type. Like they're the comedic relief. And then
yeah, for sure.
And Sam's just kind of Sam is the fool, right? Oh God, what's the term that I'm looking for? I'll think of it in a second, but it's kind of like from Man of La Mancha. You know what I'm talking about?
Nope.
Don Quixote.
Oh.
I know what you're talking. I know what you're talking about, but
damn it. I was like, I wish that I knew the word you're looking for so that I could help you out. And now I'm looking for the same word and I don't know what it is. I don't remember.
I'm gonna have to look this up. It's just like the greater fool.
Yeah,
the greater fool. That's all it is.
Fool.
Yeah, the greater fool. Yeah. So like, yeah, the greater fool is, just someone who is so blind to their own inadequacies that all they see is that the mission at the end of the day. Like I'm accompanying Frodo. That's all I know. And the ring's got to be destroyed. Like, that's it. That's it. That's all Samwise is good for. That's all he does. And it doesn't really matter how it happens or whatever, but anything that stops him or anything that gets in his way, that's a problem, which is why he is so why he hates Gollum so much. Of course, don't we all? But I mean, he's never trustful of anybody, including Aragorn at the beginning, right?
Oh yeah.
So I mean, it's one of those things. Like, he doesn't trust anyone. I mean, he doesn't even like the fact that Merry and Pippin are there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, he was given this mission and he's like a robot almost. Like, we're doing this. But thoughts on Sam? That was just too perfect.
Well, I feel like yeah. Thoughts on Samwise. I feel like at the very beginning when he gets caught, dropping the eaves, Gandalf just scares the hell out of him.
Mm-hmm.
So now from that point on, he's going to be totally focused on the mission because he doesn't want Gandalf to turn him into anything unnatural.
Yeah.
That's a good point, actually.
But even in, like, I'm going to be honest, I watched half of Two Towers today just because I thought, well, I just watched the extended Fellowship, I might as well just keep going. And it's like there's so many moments in the movies where Frodo is just breaking, where it's like he's about to get found, he's going to get caught, he's going to put the ring on, and Sam's right there and he helps him out. It's like for all his annoying moments, there's no way that happens without him.
I mean, I find that to be the interesting thing about Sam, that like as obnoxious as he is, the movie doesn't work without him. And if he was much less obnoxious, the movie wouldn't work. Like he has to be obnoxiously positive or the movie doesn't happen. And it doesn't have those interesting peaks and valleys. Or I guess the story rather, because I'm assuming I haven't read the books more than a little bit, but I assume that those kind of beats with Sam are similar.
I want to get a couple more quotes from you guys, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume something. But I want to go ahead and here's my hot take. There's some great lines in this film. This isn't a line type movie, really. I mean, there's so many other, we're going to talk about so many other great things about this film, including how over a difference of 20 years, how two students from TCU, the same school, used this film in the same different way, which is funny. We'll get to that in a minute. But Frodo doesn't have a single memorable quote in this film.
No, not at all.
No.
So
100%.
I mean, the closest thing is in the very beginning when he's like, we Bagginses were well thought of, before you came along, I mean, that's about it. I mean, he really has he's got really nothing memorable to say. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's the
I got one that he
Oh, hit me, Sam. What's up?
Absolutely.
Hit me.
I've got one where he goads Gandalf into saying something really memorable.
At the very beginning. Counts. Yeah, at the beginning, or he arrives precisely as when he means to, or what? Hit me.
No, he says, I wish the ring had never come to me. None of this had ever happened. And then Gandalf says, so do all who live in such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
That's a good one.
So he's in the conversation where Gandalf says something incredibly memorable, but that's about as good as it gets for Frodo in memorable quotes.
Jay Davis brings up another one from Gandalf, Frodo wakes up from his coma or whatever. He's like, where were you? You weren't at the Prancing Pony. And Gandalf's like, I was delayed. And according to Tripp, this was 18 years, just 2 decades. Sorry.
Yeah.
God, you know what? I was really into this ham sandwich that my wife made me. Just couldn't get away. I was really into Game of Thrones, and I was binging that. Couldn't get away. I was delayed. No, I think that's really a couple of the lines and stuff. Again, there's lines that we can pick apart probably, and there'll probably be some more come up as we're talking about. I love the it comes in pints, that one's really great. But I think when Gandalf says it several times, fool of a took, when they're in Moria, and he's like, throw yourself in next time and rid us of your stupidity. I mean, dude, Gandalf is pretty savage sometimes, throughout this film, actually throughout the series. He doesn't pull any punches sometimes, which is pretty, it's he doesn't make you feel good about yourself. He's not that type of wizard.
Oh, he's a tough love type of wizard.
Yeah,
that is for sure.
Well, I think he's only got love for Frodo. That's it. That's it. I guess. I mean, and Bilbo. He really likes.
Yeah, I guess
he really likes nobody else. If you think about it, he really does not like anybody else. I mean, he respects Aragorn. I think that's appropriate. But I mean, can we really? I mean, does he really? Can you really say he likes him?
Probably not.
You know, that's a great point. I mean, you see the respect in all of the movies, but it's like, do they like each other? I don't know.
Could it be? No, let's just bring this full circle, right? Could it be because he was betrayed by one of his oldest friends in Saruman?
I think that could be. That kind of actually tracks.
Oh, that's an excellent point.
Something to peel, yeah, a layer to peel back there, right? You know, like what, you know, I mean, Gandalf likes, and it's interesting, right? So Gandalf, you know, projectionally is the wise old man. He's the wise man in the film. And Samwise, the fool, the greater fool, they actually are on the same track, right? Like nothing is interfering with the mission. Like it's all about sacrifice and figuring out a way until it actually gets accomplished, which is the ring being destroyed. This is all just coming out now. It's kind of cool.
I just remembered another quote that I want to hit before it leaves my brain, which was, I think I lost it. Your love of halflings has clearly slowed your mind when Saruman said that. I love that quote.
And the love of their weed. Yeah.
Oh, actually, I might have lost a word there.
Yeah.
It was about like their what do they call it? Pipeweed.
Pipeweed. Yeah. It's Peter Jackson's anti-smoking commercial just in the middle of fucking Fellowship. It sucks. It's like, thanks, man. Appreciate that. It's like, all the halflings want to do, man, is just like farm, eat some cupcakes, smoke a little pipe weed. Like, they ain't hurting anybody. But no, that's a problem for you, Saruman. Corrupt bastard. Like,
you know, it sounds like Saruman needs a little pipe weed.
Yeah, right. Like, dude, lighten up a little bit, man. I mean, seriously. But I mean, like, rest in peace, Christopher Lee, man. Like, that guy was an incredible actor.
Yeah,
incredible, and
he's just a total badass all around.
He's great in these films too. Like, he's really good in these films.
He plays. I mean, he always has played a really good bad guy, but I feel like he's particularly good in these movies, playing a good guy who suddenly turned into a bad guy.
Well, and also, like, you never really see him as a good guy in the film.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, he's just bad, and he really makes you hate the character.
Well, I mean, it's not just that he's siding with Sauron, and he's like, he represents evil, right? Like Isengard, which was like this beacon of hope and truth and everything. I mean, he turns it into this fortress of darkness overnight. I mean, he becomes like, you know, every environmentalist's worst nightmare. He's tearing down the trees, and, you know, he destroys an entire world, essentially, or half of an entire world. You know, he like creates these god awful creatures in Orokai, you know, which is man, when you think about this being PG-13, man, there's some pretty graphic stuff in this film. Like,
right?
the language isn't there, but like looking back, like I was like, I can't wait to watch this with my son. And then I'm watching, I'm like, holy shit, he's not watching this for like another 10 years.
Dude, the orcs are pretty scary. And then like the cave troll, which, speaking of the cave troll, like those effects hold up, man. Some of the effects in this movie don't, but that one still looks pretty scary.
No, seriously, like I own the original the extended edition DVDs, right? So like like not Blu-ray, right? And I'm watching it on, you know, I'm watching it on a regular like widescreen television, and like the movie holds up, which is kind of what we were talking about, like with Sam. Like, I mean, Sam, like when you were watching it this week, I mean, going back 15 years in your own life when you first saw it, I mean, like compared to some of the films you watch now, I mean, like, in your mind, does it hold up?
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of amazing how well it holds up. And this is the first one of this. Lots of movies from the early 2000s, late 90s, the CGI just not the same.
Yeah.
It just looks awful now.
I was thinking about that, like, I don't know, 30 minutes or so into the movie when they're having Bilbo's 111th birthday party. I was thinking about how I think the costumes in this movie were kind of medieval styled enough that they don't feel dated. Like,
Yeah.
one of the things that always dates movies is like when you watch a 90s movie, everybody's wearing 90s clothes.
Right.
And it feels like a 90s movie. This doesn't feel like a early 2000s movie. Like, you can't really, like, just watching it, you can't really tell when it was made, in my mind at least. I was wondering the same thing if Sam had a different impression than I do, but it sounds like he's kind of on the same page.
Yeah, well, we're going to get to some in short order. Actually, we're going to get to some films of the age, right? And actually, was actually nominated for best costume design. It's a great point there, Tripp. So, but before we transition here, I wanted to take a quick break because we are smoking cigars and everything tonight. So, Tripp, what did you light up for tonight's festivities?
I am just finishing it up. Like, I'm at the point where I need to rip out another cigar, but it's a Micallef Herencia Maduro.
Nice, good call. Sam, what are you smoking on?
Oh, well, Tripp, thank you for smoking Micallef. I appreciate it. I am currently smoking one of my last to be named Maduros. It was the precursor to the Micallef A. So this first batch we came out with in early 2020, absolutely delicious, but I've been plowing through it, lighting up a Medallion next. How about you?
So, it would have been really comical if you were like, I'm smoking an Opus X, boys, or something. Like, no, I'm actually smoking the Micallef Migdalia Corona, which is what I'm wrapping up. And then you have the precursor, Sam, but in reserve, I've got a couple of A's because this is the A is my favorite Micallef cigar. My first love will always be the La Experiencia La Crema. Like, that's my shit. But the A has just become my all-time favorite that you guys do. And so I got a couple of those in reserve. This was a 3-hour movie, so I mean the criticism of it tonight should at least last a couple of hours in my mind. So who knows how long we'll be smoking. But despite the heat that we're all suffering through, the dedication that we have, I want our audience to know this. Like, it's all like 100 degrees, either via humidity or just in general where we're at. So I want everyone to appreciate this for what it is. But any last minute throw-ins for favorite quotes? Because I got one more. I think it's comical.
I mean, I don't know if this is your one more, but I gotta throw in "Fly, you fools." That's just a really memorable one to me. A good way to say "Run away, you idiots."
No, I love it. I like that one too. So it's actually my line. My last line is in the same scene. It's actually a little bit prior to that. So it's when Gimli is they're all trying to jump from the falling staircase to get to the bridge, in Moria. And Gimli's like, hey, no one tosses a dwarf. And then he jumps and he, misses because, he's like, 3 foot nothing or whatever and weighs like 500 pounds. And he has an axe that weighs like as much as he does. And so they grab him by the beard and like my reaction is still like my reaction now, because I have one, is still like, oh God. Because look, I have an 18-month-old kid, and when he gets his hooks into my beard and yanks on it, man, it brings tears to my eyes, and not in a good way. I mean, it fucking hurts. So like the fact that someone yanked on his beard, he's like, not the beard. Like, I was like, man, I get you, Gimli. I got you, man. I got you. That's a good time. Anyway, Sam, any other throw-ins?
So I got one more, and this is one that I'm confused because I've seen the extended so many times that I don't remember if it's in the original. But it's as they're leaving Lothlorien, Legolas goes, the elvish white bread. It's like one small bite is enough to feed a grown man. And then Merry looks at Pippin. He's like, how many did you eat?
Yes.
4. It's like, oh, this
And then he
classic
rips that
Hobbit
huge
right
burp.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, that line got me too. I don't remember if that was in the original or not, but that one got me.
Okay, so that brings up a good point. Is there any other version other than the extended? Now that we've experienced both, is there any other version?
Let me pull up my notes because I actually wrote some notes specifically with my thoughts on this. For me, no. I saw the theatrical cut 3 times, and then the day it came out, I bought the extended edition and watched that, which I don't remember. I'm trying to remember the timing. It didn't come out when the DVDs came out,
Oh,
but
no,
it came out
a year
before Two
later.
Towers.
It came out a year later.
Oh, you know what? I bet it came out like the same week that the Two Towers came out in theaters. That's probably what it was. But my thoughts are there is so much context that you get for things that exist in the theatrical cut but are never explained. Like one of them is they actually show when Isildur steals the ring at the very beginning in like the prologue,
Right,
and holds it in his hand. You see it shrink, and then he gets in the water and it grows, which is why it fell off in the water for no reason, because it can grow and shrink at will, and that's why whoever puts it on it fits. But the scene where it shows it shrinking wasn't in the original movie, and I don't remember if it falling off was in there or not, or if it was just kind of said that he dropped it and lost it.
we're gonna get to nitpicks at the very end, but I think this is an appropriate moment to mention, like Sauron, the god of the dark world, like the most powerful evil being in the history of all Middle Earth,
Who's
all
been
powerful.
terrorizing for like 5,000 years.
Yeah, and he created this one ring to rule them all, right? And he's fucking just wailing like divisions of men, right, with his battle axe in this opening scene, right? And one little measly little strike with a broken sword to his hand takes him down. Like, wow.
Yeah, I had never thought of it that way. That does seem kind of weird that he's so powerful. And I mean, in the context of the movie, he loses it immediately. Like as soon as he puts it on and starts using it in battle, he gets his finger chopped off and no longer has possession of it.
Right.
Which seems pretty weak for an all-powerful evil badass.
Well, consider he created it, right? So he wields the power of it, and I don't know. To me, it was for a film, as we've like progressively talked about it just a moment ago, as it progresses and it gets really more graphic. I mean, there's people getting like arrows through eyeballs, and I mean heads getting chopped off and stuff like that. Like, man, he could have ran that that splintered sword through some bodily orifice, and chopped off the hand. It's it's a quick edit. Like, I don't know.
You would think,
right?
You know what? This is just a spoiler for the audience. The nitpicks are going to be a ton of fun on this movie.
I agree.
Oh yeah,
there are so many.
Oh god, I've got tons. Like I've absolutely got tons. It's and they're all comical too, which is just really fun. Like, I don't know. Like I loved watching this film.
We all love this movie.
Go ahead, Sam. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we all love this movie. We all love this movie, but we all have hilarious nitpicks about it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So those are some of the best quotes that we found in it. And there's some great ones in the chat too. So if you guys keep those coming, that's great. My other, so I really like on these movie shows that I do, I really like reading I don't know if you guys, I get a kick out of sometimes reading like the IMDb description of a movie, because it's not really like the plot per se. It's like a really oversimplified, like generic description of in this case, a pretty epic film, right? So this is a film that has transcended 20 years, connected generations, right? Sam's here. You and I are here, Tripp. Older people in the audience who connected with it, the people who originally read the book as children and then got to see it, it's that kind of iconic film, right? So what does IMDb do? They reduce it down to one sentence. Here we go. Released in 2001, a meek hobbit from the Shire and 8 companions set out on a journey to destroy the powerful One Ring and save Middle-earth from the Dark Lord Sauron. It's the most boring description I've ever heard in my entire life.
And also, like, I don't know if, like, the second half of that sentence is 2 movies later. They set off in this movie, but that's about it.
Yeah. It's like nowhere close. Like that was one of the things, when I was in the theater with my sister watching this for the first time, right? And it's like we're like 2 hours and 45 minutes in, right? And I'm like, holy shit, I'm looking at my watch, not because I'm bored, but I'm like, man, they better figure out how to get to. I had no idea, right? I had no idea. I never read the books. I didn't know the story, right? I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, they better fucking hurry up to this Mordor place, man. Like this is like, how long is this film? And it goes on for another 30 minutes, but I mean at that point, but like, and then I'm like, oh shit, it's continuation. Like, oh, we don't wait, what?
I mean, it's not just I'll hold my thoughts on this until nitpicks if you want.
That's fine.
So you feel like there's supposed to be more movie, and he's like, all right, there it is, that's where we got to go, and then it just cuts to black. Like, this movie ends so suddenly with no warning. There's a big action scene, and then Sam and Frodo come out of the trees and see the valley, and they're like, end of the movie.
Yeah.
They say one sentence and it's over.
Yeah, and then the 3
It's
remaining
so
guys
weird.
of the Fellowship are like, yeah, we're gonna go get the halflings.
Yeah, it pacing wise, it feels very strange in a movie. But I guess having the ace in the pocket of already having filmed most of the next movie, they weren't worried about like not having a sequel or anything like that. But still, it's like when you finish this movie, you're ready to watch the next one.
It's the ultimate cliffhanger. Well, I mean, Sam just proved it. He said like he tuned in, like he turned on the 2 Towers for a few hours today.
Yeah, exactly. So he could watch the end of this movie. The first hour of 2 Towers feels like the end of this movie.
Right.
Oh, you're 100% right. I've just felt like I was watching the same movie.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, Chrissy Critchfield's in the comments, and she was saying one of her favorite lines is "Looks like meat is back on the menu, boys," and that's from 2 Towers, which I love that. I love that line too. That one's a great quote.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're absolutely right, Sam. That the first hour of 2 Towers, or seems like the conclusion. Like, oh, finally, Fellowship's over. We're good.
Yeah.
Now I can watch the 2 Towers, even though I'm an hour into the next movie. So, okay, so going back to 2001, right? And so this film is actually I like diving into the Academy. I really like diving into Academy Awards because as you look back historically, like the Academy, there are times when the Academy really has a ton of foresight, and things really, like, their awards really age well. Like, even though they seem like misses at the time, they really age well. And then there's times where they're misses and they're like 20 years later, they're terrible. It's even worse, right? And I think we've got some examples of both in this case. So Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring is nominated for 13 Oscars. 13 Oscars, okay? It wins 4. And we're going to discuss how they kind of age. So the wins that it wins for: best cinematography, best makeup, which I think that hands down, right? That's a pretty good close. Best effects, visual effects, and we talked about that a second ago. Like, again, it's 2021. We're watching the extended version. In my case, I'm watching the DVD, not even the Blu-ray, and I'm like, I'm all in. Like, this, none of it looks weird. None of it looks fake.
I was watching it on HBO Max, so it was in like 4K. And I agree with you. There were like, I took notes on maybe 3 parts when an effect like looked aged. But the fact that, like, one of the things with this movie is they kind of, it was a weird crossing where like practical effects had gotten to a point where they were fantastic, but they were aging, or I guess they were losing to CGI at the time.
Right.
And Peter Jackson said, we're not going to use much CGI. We're going to use it when we have to, but we're going to use practical when we can. And I feel like that's what makes the movie look so good. because the CGI, some of the CGI looks pretty bad, but for the most part, you can't tell that the effects have like the effects haven't aged at all for most of the practical effects. The mats, the miniatures, they look fantastic.
Well, considering we're talking about Lord of the Rings, and I'm going to mention a film that, like, oh my God, pales in comparison, right? But I was watching Poseidon the other day. You know, the Kurt Russell and a couple other like B-list actors and actresses in the film. The effects in that, I mean, the movie's like maybe 10 years old, maybe 12.
Something like that.
And the effects have aged terribly. It's awful. It's awful.
Yeah, and a lot of movies of this era have, because they were jumping on the CGI bandwagon before it was ready. And I kind of feel like CGI these days might feel the same way in 20 years, but who knows? But like everybody was switching over to CGI, and Peter Jackson didn't want to do it, and way to change the way that effects were done for everyone. Like they pioneered new technologies in CGI because what existed didn't cut it.
Jay Davis is putting a comment in the chat. I did not. I said I did not call Kurt Russell a B-list. I said Kurt Russell and some B-list actors and actresses. Okay, Kurt Russell is not a B-lister. Okay, Jay, cool your horses, man. It's all good. I have a lot of respect for Kurt Russell. Dude's epic. All right, but you know, going back to the effects thing, like I don't know, like Sam, since you and look, I'm a fan of some of the films too, but you kind of came of age during the beginning of this Marvel superhero epic takeover of cinema. I feel like in 20 years, like we're not going to look back on like Iron Man and the Avengers like the way that we look back on Lord of the Rings. What do you think? You grew up during that age. What do you think?
You know, that's a really interesting take. You know, I was in college when kind of Marvel hit its peak, you know, with Infinity War and stuff like this. But man, I don't know. They're so heavily reliant on CGI and the newer technology that they don't have to use a lot of like the makeup like you'd see on orcs in Lord of the Rings. You know, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Like I have no context for what the next 20 years is going to look like, but will it age better? I mean, probably not, because this movie aged beautifully.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard for them to age better than this movie did.
My curiosity about CGI right now is that in the 90s CGI looked incredible. Like, do you remember the first time you played a PlayStation game, Bear? And it was like, how can a video game look like this?
Right.
It looks so real. And then now looking at that game, it looks horrendous.
Yeah, looking at Madden 97 or like you know, like the Final Fantasy games and things like that, like they're just it's abysmal compared to what's like it's available now. I mean, I can play better technology games on my phone.
Oh, absolutely. But the thing is, like, as a viewer, you can't tell something doesn't age until it's already aging. Like, you can't tell if something's going to age until it happens with computer graphics, because the rate that computer graphics get better is kind of all over the place. Like, there are periods where we've gone 5 years without huge improvements, and there are periods where we've had insane improvements over the course of 5 years.
Right. Well, like the thing I think about too, like The Irishman, you know, the Netflix saga that Scorsese did, like with speaking of aging, the anti-aging technology. Like, how's that going to look in 20 years? Like, I just think it's going to look bad. I think it's going to look really terrible.
I think the Marvel stuff's definitely going to age better than that.
Yeah, I mean, I love the film. Like, that's not a knock. I think The Irishman was a great film. It's just it's really hard to get, because I grew up with those guys and I saw them in their youth when they were before in movies and playing the age of the actors that they were playing in 2020. Playing, I saw them in older films at the same age. You know, I saw Pacino in The Godfather. You know, I saw De Niro, in Godfather 2, and that was the age that these guys were supposed to be in the film, The Irishman, essentially, and it's just it kind of just throws you. Plus, it's really awesome when Pacino's supposed to be playing a 40-year-old man, and when he gets up out of a couch, you can see all 75 years of Al Pacino getting out of that couch. It's pretty comical, but don't want to get too far off topic here. So coming back to the Academy Awards, though, so wins for best effects, visual effects, which totally stands up even after 20 years. That's one aged incredibly well. But here's the one, Sam, that you wanted to talk about. Best music, original score, Howard Shore wins it. Wanted you to share your thoughts.
The score is so iconic. Like every time, like you could put on the album from The Fellowship of the Ring and you would be able to tell what scene that song was played. Like it's so iconic in setting the tone for the movie. It starts out right at the beginning when they're talking about the history of the ring. So we all kind of have that going on in our head now.
Yeah, you can hear it playing. This was the connection of the comment that I made earlier, right? So Sam, you and I attended the same university many years apart, TCU.
Mm-hmm.
How did you used to study? How did you do those long study sessions? What got you through those long study sessions?
Yep. So I go to the library, sit in the library, throw the headphones in, and I could never study with music with words because my mind just go along with the words. So I couldn't do it. I'd play film scores, and my 3 favorites: The Lord of the Rings, Bear and I did a while back, Gladiator, and then a movie that has an extremely similar score to Gladiator, which was Pirates of the Caribbean. But it was The Lord of the Rings was the one that was like always like, oh man, I need to go home and watch that movie.
So here's the funny part. So almost 20 years earlier, I'm a student at TCU. There's this technology called CDs because I couldn't afford the newfangled technology known as MP3 players. I could not afford an iPod. But I went out and bought the soundtrack for Lord of the Rings, and that's what I did. I would go to the same library, maybe even the same spot, man, the basement or by the stacks, really find a quiet spot. And
the basement was the place.
Yeah, throw in the headphones, man, and you could get lost down there. It was perfect for those long study sessions. Tripp, what about you? Did you have any connection to the soundtrack? I mean, we're kind of waxing poetic about it, but what about you?
Not really. I was in high school when it came out, and I was not studying very much, to be honest. So I mostly listened to music with words at the time. I hadn't thought about how good the soundtrack is. I don't think I've listened to it on its own ever. So I might have to do that this week while I'm working and see how it feels.
I think so. Put it on the Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of technology, right? No, yeah, Sam and I are trying to be good studious students over here, listening to some soundtracks, and Tripp's over there jamming to like System of a Down or whatever.
Yeah,
doing some algebra or advanced calculus.
Yep.
What has me really curious is if all 3 of the Lord of the Rings movies won that same Oscar for the best original score.
Yeah, Howard Shore is a genius, man. Like I think he's like one of the most most underwritten, cinematic, musical composers of our time, right? The John Williams is the go-to, right? Yeah. Hans Zimmer, John Williams, like they're the go-tos. But I mean, Howard Shore, man, geez, unbelievable. This is unbelievable score. So there are a couple of other wins, right? So it's those are the wins. Those are the wins. Best cinematography, best makeup, best musical original score, best effects. Okay, so those are the 4 wins. It's nominated for 13 Oscars. So of course it's nominated for Best Picture, right? This is always the most controversial subject ever, anyways, right? Every year it's always the most controversial.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go through the list, right? So spoiler alert, Lord of the Rings does not win, but it's nominated, right? These are the other nominees. Moulin Rouge, Baz Luhrmann, right? Great film.
Mm-hmm.
Gosford Park, Robert Altman, also a very good film. I would not put it in the class of Lord of the Rings or Moulin Rouge, but it's good. In the Bedroom, gotta be honest, never seen and haven't even really heard of.
Same.
Sam, In the Bedroom? Are we missing something by not watching
never heard
Graham
of it.
Leander's greatest cinematic achievement, maybe? All right.
I vaguely remember the name Gosford Park, but I've never seen that either.
It's good. It's a good film. I don't know
But
if it's
I
your bad.
also,
I don't
it
know
was
if it's
probably
your bad.
rated R, and I was 17 when this came out, so I was like just coming around to rated R movies.
I don't think it's your bag. I mean, I don't want to be like, I don't want to put you in a pigeonhole, you Trip, but I don't think it's your jam. But it's a good film. It's a good film. I mean, I would encourage you to check it out. Here's the movie that wins. Trip, you mentioned it earlier. Brian Grazer and Ron Howard, A Beautiful Mind. How does this Oscar win age 20 years later?
This is one of those ones that if you go back to it, it's an amazing movie, but it doesn't have staying power in pop culture. Like, I don't even know if many Best Picture winners do. A Beautiful Mind is an amazing movie that I think probably deserved Best Picture that year. Maybe, I don't know. It's close between that and Lord of the Rings, and I haven't seen that in a long time. But I don't think that's the kind of movie that people are still discovering now. That's the kind of movie that people are, people who saw it at the time go back and watch, but doesn't really get new viewers the way that Lord of the Rings does.
Well, like when you look at iconic films, like I put Lord of the Rings in the class of something like another film that I mentioned a moment ago, Godfather. Like when I watch The Godfather with my son many years from now, like that, hopefully he feels the same way about The Godfather the way that I do, right? That it's a movie that transcends time, right?
Yeah.
Like Lord of the Rings, I feel is going to do that. I think, when you like you said, your kiddos watched and they're like, man, I really like this film. And I think my kids will like it too.
Yeah.
Sam, you don't have kids yet, but I mean, I feel like your love of it will transfer generations too. And I because we talked about the way that this is laid out, the effects, the costumes, because of its medieval time period-esque, like it's going to age well regardless, but I think it's going to be a movie that transcends time, kind of like the Indiana Jones Chronicles, to put Star Wars, right? To kind of put it in the same realm of, I guess, the same category.
A classic of pop culture.
Yeah.
Where like there's nobody who grows up having never heard of Star Wars.
Right.
Just like there's nobody who grows up having never heard of Indiana Jones or Lord of the Rings, or I guess Game of Thrones now is becoming, I mean, maybe not now. We'll see how it ages when the sequels come out. But those movies that every generation knows about, that are thought of as classics going forward forever.
Sam, have you seen A Beautiful Mind?
I haven't, but that kind of speaks to how it aged, because everyone I know has at least heard of Lord of the Rings and either adores it or they're like, oh, I don't watch movies like that, but they've heard of it.
And they're no longer your friends, right? The people are like, oh, I watch movies like that.
Well, that, or I convince them to watch the movie.
Yeah, I was going to say he kidnaps them and chains them to a chair and makes them watch it, obviously.
I may not start with extended edition right away, but they're definitely watching the theatrical cut. But it's like it's kind of one of those first movies that, we have Marvel now with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the Fellowship of the Ring introduced this entire universe of Tolkien. And you don't see. It's kind of the first movie that comes to mind besides Star Wars that does that.
I agree.
Right. It's a world, and like we'll probably touch on this a couple of times, but I think this really. I want to. There's two people that you need to applaud in this case, right? Like we never give enough credit to Tolkien, right? I don't think I think as many people like he has like this godlike worship in nerddom, but I still think he's still underwritten. Like I still think that people are like, oh well, yeah, these films are amazing. The world he created this world in a literary fashion, like it.
He has a hardcore following, but for the most part, I feel like he's underrated. Like people kind of overlook the fact that he created this 85 years ago.
Yeah, there's maps, there's languages. I mean, there's actually so much like unpublished material that he put together to kind of back up the creation of this world, which is, I mean, it's just, I mean, I think that's why the film does so well and why the book stands up over almost a century, is that it's more than just words on a page, right? He created a world. Like
it has this super rich backstory, the way that Star Wars does, for example. Like Star Wars, every character who's ever been on screen has a name and a backstory, and that's exactly, I mean, that was I would assume kind of modeled after Lord of the Rings a little bit, since it predates it.
Yeah, cinematically, yeah, yeah, 100%. So Best Picture always is controversial, but then I feel like even worse than like Best Actor awards or Best Actress awards, I feel like the Supporting Actor and Actress awards are really controversial over time, right? When we look back at this, so Ian McKellen, who plays Gandalf the Grey, is nominated for Best Supporting Actor in this film. Doesn't win. And here are the other nominees. Okay, John Voight, he plays Howard Cosell in Ali. Dreadful makeup in this film, dreadful. But he does Cosell spot on, so I totally got to give it to him. He's also not in the film very much, so they're really giving it to him for his performance because the makeup is just awful. Ben Kingsley, who's an amazing actor, is Don Logan in Sexy Beast, is also nominated. One of my personal favorites, because I'm a huge Denzel Washington freak, and so the movie Training Day is like one of my all-time faves. Ethan Hawke is the supporting actor in that film, and he's nominated for Officer Jake Hoyt, which I thought was incredible. None of those guys win. None of them win. So the person who wins Best Supporting Actor is Jim Broadbent, who plays John Belay in the film Iris.
I had to look up Iris, by the way. I don't recall this movie existing ever.
I've never seen it. Is that unfair to Jim Broadbent? Yes, it is. But I've never seen it. But again, that kind of talks to the aging part. Sam, Sam, the entire list, how many movies have you seen?
I was going to say, I'm curious about Training Day too.
Iris, Training Day, Sexy Beast, Lord of the Rings, and Ali. How many have you seen? We know you've seen Lord of the Rings.
Well, I'm ashamed to say I've only seen Lord of the Rings. I've never seen Training Day.
You need to fix that one, but that's my personal bias. But yeah, okay.
I do need to fix that one. I totally agree. Iris, I'd never even heard of until I had to Google it when you sent the agenda. But yeah, Training Day I've heard of. I've seen Denzel, like a picture of Denzel from that movie all the time.
Right.
But that's really the only other movie I've even heard of is Training Day.
Look, Jim Broadbent is an accomplished actor. He's been in over 160 films. Okay. And this is no disrespect, but Jim Broadbent and that I mean, he better have a fucking room dedicated to this Oscar in his house. Like the people he beats out. I mean, Ben Kingsley, Ian McKellen, Ethan Hawke. I mean, and Ethan Hawke's probably hot take here. That's Ethan Hawke's best performance ever. And I don't think it'll ever be beat. Like for him personally, I don't think he'll ever do a better performance on film than he was as a Officer Jake Hoyt in Training Day. And someone can fight me on
I'll
that.
counter that with Gattaca, but this isn't about Gattaca. So
yeah,
we'll move on.
But Jim Broadbent, he's and it's the only Oscar he's ever won is for Iris. But he's in he's in some great. I mean, he was actually in another great film that year. He was in Moulin Rouge, right? He was in The Iron Lady, Gangs of New York. If you want to, it's really comical, right? He's actually the voice of a Teletubby.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Which is comic. He's in one of the, and I think he's in one or two of the Bridget Jones's movies. I think he's Bridget Jones's dad, if I remember correctly. Really hasn't done. His career arc is just nothing like some of these others, including this one probably angers me more than Best Picture, to be honest. If you don't want to give it to Ian McKellen, fine. Me personally, I would have given it to Ethan Hawke, but if Ian McKellen doesn't get it, but and I have a funny story about this that I'll tell off air about this, so you guys got to remind me. It's just not appropriate, but it's funny about Ethan Hawke and this award. This one angers me. I'm not gonna lie. It's just like in a movie that's forgettable. None of us have heard of it. None of us have seen it. And by an actor that, he better have a room dedicated to this award. I'm serious. Any other thoughts? Best Supporting Actor.
I kind of feel the same way. You got an iconic performance from Ian McKellen that has stood the test of time for 20 years. That every new person watching this movie is like, Gandalf. Just like this comforting character who's the man. And then, Training Day is the only other movie that's really stood the test of time.
Yeah, even Ali, Ali was a huge movie at the time. But I feel like within 10 years, people were not rewatching that frequently or anything like that.
See, I feel bad for Will Smith because he really dedicated himself to that role and he threw himself into it. Jamie Foxx steals that film, by the way. And he actually got robbed. He should have been nominated over Jon Voight, in my opinion, for Best Supporting Actor. But that's another take. But I feel bad because Ali got overshadowed by Training Day.
Yeah.
In terms of the black artist performance, right? Denzel just crushes Will Smith in a fictional role, crushes the real life role.
Yeah.
And Will Smith is brilliant as Ali. That's the thing.
Phenomenal biopic role.
Yeah, he's brilliant as Muhammad Ali. He's absolutely brilliant. And Denzel just crushes him, right? But then moving on to this next one, right? Best Director, right? So Peter Jackson, in my mind, and I have in my personal list of favorite directors, Peter Jackson's pretty far down the list. But what I will say about Peter Jackson, in my own opinion, is he delivered 3 of the most iconic directorial works in the last half century. Not even the last 20 years, the last half century, going back 50 years.
Yeah.
What he did by taking on the Lord of the Rings saga and then ultimately The Hobbit, years later and everything, but mostly these films. It's unbelievable what Peter Jackson did. How do you guys feel about Peter Jackson? Where's he on your all-time list of directors?
All time, I can confidently say top 15. I don't have a list in mind, but definitely top 15. I don't know if he'd make the top 10 or not, but like I love the movies he did before this, Dead Alive and what's
Really
the other
underrated film.
one? The one with the aliens. Bad. I lost the name.
Bad Taste?
Bad Taste. I love those movies. They're very different than this. This was like he spent like easily 8 years, probably 10, creating in his mind a plan that he would eventually be able to execute to make these 3 movies at once. Like he basically just made these back to back over the course of 2 years or so. And he had, we talked about it in the green room, the credits of Fellowship of the Ring Extended Edition are 28 minutes long. And they are dense credits. It's not like those credits where it shows each name and then fades to black. Like it does that for a minute and then scrolls for 27 minutes. It's insane how many people worked on this movie. And the Weta Workshop came from this, of course, which now they're kind of viewed as the masters of both CGI and practical effects. And just the amount of resources he got together. He had hundreds and hundreds of people working on building miniatures, building props, building costumes, building everything. That I feel like he at the very least he put in a hell of a lot more time than Ron Howard did.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an understatement.
And I love Ron Howard too. Like, right?
Me too.
Like,
but the fact that Peter Jackson got all of this to come together and result in an amazing movie is pretty impressive, I would say.
Sam, before you give your thoughts, your own personal thoughts on Peter Jackson, here's the IMDb run for Peter Jackson. You ready for this? So 1987, that is actually his directorial debut. Really, I mean, he did a short like in the 70s.
Yeah.
But it was 1987, Bad Taste. Meet the Feebles in 89. Dead
another
Alive.
amazing movie.
Yeah. Dead Alive, 92. Heavenly Creatures, 94. He did a TV movie in 95 called Forgotten Silver. The Frighteners in 96.
Oh, I forgot he did that.
Fast forward to 2001, and here we are. The Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers in 02, Return of the King in 03. Then he does King Kong in 2005, The Lovely Bones in 2009. And then the Hobbit films in 2012 through 14. And then, I mean, he does some other films after that. I mean, The Adventures of Tintin, he's actually, that's announced. He's actually doing that later, but The Hobbit is kind of where it ends for him so far. I mean, that was, 7 years ago was the last thing he really did. So Sam, your thoughts on Peter Jackson in terms of where he ranks in directors and like, again, how he stands up in the world of the world of directors, you think?
Well, I've never kept track of directors like I probably should have, but what he does in this movie, and this one even more so than Two Towers and Return of the King. It's like this book was written in, mid 1950s is when it was published, and no one dared tackle it because of the scope of the universe that it's written in. And he does it and absolutely kills it and brings it to life. Like the challenge you have to take on as a director to do that. I haven't seen Beautiful Mind, but there's no way it was that challenging.
No.
To take on you have 3 extremely dense books of material to work from, plus all of the other unpublished stuff that has background information. Oh, and The Hobbit.
Right.
And you're sneaking references to The Hobbit into this first movie.
Mm-hmm.
No, the most challenging thing Ron Howard did in Beautiful Mind was tackling the ego of Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
let's be honest.
Yeah, post Gladiator Russell Crowe.
Yeah, that's the thing about, speaking of ego, right? And I think that's why this film and these series of films does incredibly well. Is there, by the end of it, by the end of the first one, and then definitely by the end of the third one, the Return of the King, they're all star. I mean, they're all like, it's everyone's apex mountain, right?
Yeah.
They all hit their they can do anything they want after that. It's nuts. And then they go on, and the actors and actresses in this film go on to make many, many, many other mistakes,
I mean, like Elijah Wood, for example, like he went from being that dude from The Faculty to being a producer and just making whatever he wants for 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, he was that kid actor. Yeah, he was that childhood actor, and then he gets this role, which we're going to talk about recasting here in a second. But like it's just incredible what what Peter Jackson got out of all of these actors and actresses, like the level of performance, and then putting it all together. And he tackles a world that no one even dare touched.
Well, and that goes to speak for this movie. Really, like, not only set the bar, but kind of set the formula for super blockbusters, I guess you would call them, like the end game kind of movies where you have these enormous battles that weren't, like, nobody thought you could do that on film until this movie. And it really, I feel like since in the 20 years before this movie, there weren't epic action movies. There were awesome action movies, lots of them, but there was nothing that was like an entire world coming together and going on adventures like this and stuff. I'm trying to think of other movies that fit in there, but the only ones that come to mind are like The Great Wall of China with Mark Wahlberg, or The Great Wall, I guess it was called. But like movies like that, movies like The Avengers.
Wasn't it Matt Damon
like
in The Great Wall?
Oh yeah, Matt Damon. I'm sorry.
Sorry, man, didn't mean to call you out.
But movies like that are like crazy, over the top, like huge action. Before that, it was all kind of more in the style of like Armageddon. That was like a blockbuster movie, and this made blockbuster movies like an adventure rather than just a threat.
Okay, so
Yeah, it's
go ahead, please.
it's like you said, it hasn't really been done successfully since then until Marvel did it.
Yeah,
And even
that's
those
a good
first
point.
few Marvel movies, you're like, oh, these are good standalone movies. Like, they don't really go together until the Avengers came out. But the Lord of the Rings did it, boom, right off the bat in one movie. You have 9 major characters immediately, and you feel like you love all of them.
Yeah,
immediately.
So I think we've kind of danced around it, but so Peter Jackson obviously loses the Best Director award, right? But look at the list. Now this is a list. This is a list, right? So Peter Jackson's nominated for The Lord of the Rings. David Lynch for Mulholland Drive. David Lynch is incredible. Robert Altman for Gosford Park. Robert Altman's incredible. Ridley Scott for Black Hawk Down. And they all lose to Ron Howard of A Beautiful Mind, which we've already talked about. We're not gonna go back into how forgettable A Beautiful Mind is, or how, I guess, non-existent in terms of like aging, right? But all those films, I mean, Black Hawk Down's probably aged the best out of all of them.
I think so.
Outside of the Lord of the Rings, but those actors, those directors they're all icons. So I mean, I suppose if you're gonna lose, lose to another icon.
He was in good company for this one.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. And then, so it's nominated for Best Costume Design, doesn't win. Best Sound, Best Original Song, Best Art Direction, Best Editing, all losses. But Tripp, you brought up a great point about how tackling this world, it encompassed so much, not just what he put on screen, but also from the writing perspective, right?
Yeah.
So it's nominated for Best Writing Material based on a previous work, right? And here are the nominees. Of course, it loses. Here are the nominees. In the Bedroom again makes an appearance. Shrek. Yes, the animated movie Shrek is in the nominating class. It doesn't win, so okay. Ghost World, which I've also haven't seen. It's a comic.
I have
book.
seen that. That was like essentially an indie movie.
Right.
Like, I think the only reason it was in there is because it was based on a comic book in a time where comic book movies were not good.
And then it loses again to Akiva Goldsman, based on the book by Sylvia Nasser, A Beautiful Mind. How does Lord of the Rings lose this?
I can't explain it.
I don't get this one either.
I don't get it at all. It doesn't make any sense. One, my first reaction is, oh my God, Shrek was a book?
Yeah, I didn't realize that either.
Right. I mean, a children's book, mind you, but I mean, at least I think so. I mean, I haven't read the book, so I'm not going to stand here and speak on authority of it. But I mean, I would imagine it was a children's book.
Yeah, I think it's safe to assume it was a children's book.
You know, although they're like, you know, some classic Disney films that, you know, were not. I mean, they were stories, but they certainly, you know, weren't something I'd put my kids to sleep at night, like Little Mermaid, for instance.
Yeah.
Pretty graphic. But the actual story, not the Disney film. Man, this was awful too. This was an awful loss for. I mean, Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, and Peter Jackson all contributed to writing based on Tolkien's book. And oh gosh, I mean, it's just this ages terribly. And it just
it's horrible. Like, they brought to life an entire universe, and they had to cut out so much of the book because, I mean, Tolkien, phenomenal writer, but he writes a lot of things. Like, you have entire characters like Tom Bombadil who don't make the movie because they don't really progress the plot. Well, and they had the foresight to write that out.
Yeah, and there's trust me, there's also, we're going to get to this in a second. There's characters in this film that actually don't need to be in there either. But
oh, absolutely.
But yeah,
I just don't get it.
Yeah, Tolkien's like the Robert Michener of like the, you know, because I don't know if you guys have ever read Michener, but like he has this book called The Centennial. It's a biopic novel, and he spends like 112 pages talking about it's basically the Centennial is talking about basically from the cooling of the crust up to the 250th anniversary of the 200th anniversary of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's like 116 pages dedicated to a snake. So that's very Tolkien-esque in terms of writing. But yeah, I just think that this is just terrible aging. Yeah, I think the Academy really screwed up, I think, in a lot of ways.
I have a theory for this particular award, which is that this is the Academy paying homage to somebody who's been in the industry a long time. Like, Akiva Goldsman has written a ton of movies that you've heard of. I remember The Client off the top of my head. That's the only one I can recall off the top of my head. But he's written a ton of movies. And up to this point, I mean, Peter Jackson was best known for Dead Alive, and the other two, I think, were like people that were basically in his camp that helped him write some of his movies.
Well, he wrote Cinderella Man too, which is another Ron Howard film.
Oh, right.
That I really love. But he was he's got some great credits. He wrote this is not a great example of cinematic acclaim, but he wrote Batman and Robin.
Mm-hmm. And I think he wrote Batman Forever as well, which either way, neither of those are good movies.
Yeah. Did a lot of Star Trek work. I know that really kind of excites you there, Tripp.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I may be moving a little fast, but the next one that they were nominated for did win Best Costume Design. How the hell does this movie not win Best Costume Design?
That I do not understand. Like, the costumes in this movie are incredible.
Let me look up the nominees.
There's one scene in particular that comes to mind is like when those what are they called? The super evil orcs. Orokai.
Yeah.
When they're like coming out of their gross womb things, like the effects and the makeup on those guys is fantastic. Those guys terrified me when I was a kid. And I was 16.
And they also do something iconic, which is like the white hand on their helmet. It's like, if you've seen the movie, you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
It, like, you've seen the other
Yeah.
movies. What do you remember from those other costumes? It's like, there's no way it was something as unique as like, you have entire civilizations built. Like, we've got the elves. How they look.
Yeah.
That was the next thing that I was going to get to.
Yeah, you've got
Go
the
ahead.
dwarves, you've got the hobbits when they got, hairy feet and they're all gross. And then you have the orcs and the wizards. It's like the amount of work that they had to put into that they all executed flawlessly. It's hard to see how they lost.
Yeah, every
Lost to Moulin Rouge, by the way. So
okay, that kind of tracks, I guess, because Moulin Rouge had like over the top
yeah.
costumes, but this had like each culture had their own style, and then every character within that culture had their own version of the style. It was incredible costume design, I think.
Yeah.
But losing to Moulin Rouge, I guess, kind of makes sense because that's high fashion.
Yeah, it could have been worse. Like the other nominees were Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Not bad, not a bad choice. Gosford
At
Park.
least it didn't lose to A Beautiful Mind in this category.
Oh God, please. Another one, another movie I haven't heard of, The Affair of the Necklace, was also
Never heard of that one.
Yeah, but Moulin Rouge takes it. So, yeah, interesting takes. So, I think I think it could have won for best sound too. We talked about the score, but I think sound was also best editing. I think it kind of, if we really want to dive deep into nerddom and stuff, but I mean, yeah, it did not age well. The awards did not age well for this, especially on the losses, like as much. So it was really, really bad. Okay. All right. So kind of we've talked a lot about characters. We've talked a lot about quotes and also the awards and how it stood up in history and everything like that. So let's kind of go into characters here. So I have some nominees for my favorite characters, the best characters. Okay. And then we kind of spoiled something by saying like maybe Frodo may not be, but he is the centerpiece of the film. Is Frodo the best character in this film?
If you found a single person out of 1,000 people whose favorite character was Frodo, I don't know what should happen to that person, but not something good.
Oh, I totally agree with you. It's definitely not Frodo.
He's not on my list. So I mean,
Frodo holds everybody else together. Like, he's the glue, but he's a very bland character, at least, especially in the first movie. Like, over the course, he gets better, but in the first one, he's pretty lame.
Well, yeah, I mean, he almost dies like how many times, and
6 or 7 probably.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty close to it. I mean, gotta hand it to him. The guy's tough as nails, right? I mean, he almost, he gets stabbed by a cave troll. I mean, he's got the mithril, which is protecting him, but still, I mean, that couldn't have felt pleasant.
That was actually another thing that I noticed from the extended edition. They say as they're going into what's the area called again? Underground?
Moria.
The mines.
Moria. Mines of
They
Moria.
say that these are where they mine mithril. They didn't say that in the theatrical cut. The first time you really hear about mithril is about Frodo's armor.
Yeah, when Bilbo hands him the armor.
Like a little callback.
Yeah, nice. Nice, good call. Which, what, the orcs that had destroyed the mines of Moria, for them not to like arm themselves with mithril,
Dwarven axes.
like, bad call on their part, man. I mean, that's just ego.
Yeah.
Or
they're like, these very straight with like the angular point swords will do fine.
Yeah. Like, and also, like, you were talking about the Orokai too, like those swords that they carried, man. I mean they were basically like baseball bats with like dull blades on them. Like, there really wasn't much to them. Gotta hand it to like Aragorn, who's like seen like every other scene, like he's sharpening his blade, right? Like with the rock. Just, it's no wonder how many the enemy he actually kills and everything. So so here's my hot take on this. This isn't my favorite character, but here's my hot take of favorite character. The Ring.
Okay. I don't know how much character it has in this movie, but it's definitely a character.
Right. Does it get overlooked though as a character? The ring itself, like if we talk about Sauron, we talk about Saruman in terms of like the evil characters, right? And the head Uruk-hai do, which still haunts my nightmares every once in a while.
Yeah, I think you're kind of right, because like the ring, you don't really think about it, but the ring is kind of a character, that the way that it's tempting each of the characters to use it for their own good, quote unquote, even though they'll turn evil if they put it on. I hadn't thought about it as like a character.
I hadn't thought about that either, but it's like, especially in this first movie, you see the ring tempting people.
Yeah.
Like the first time, Bilbo, he won't give it up, and then he has like that meth addict scene in Rivendell.
I love
where he
that
goes
part.
crazy for a second. And then Boromir, obviously. Aragorn turns it down. He closes Frodo's hand around the ring. And then Galadriel.
Yes.
Also,
right.
With that massive scene that when I first saw this movie, when I was under 10 years of age, that was terrifying.
I bet.
But
Speaking of that scene, though, that scene has not aged well.
No, that is the
visuals in that scene are terrible.
They're not good. They're not good. But it's like this movie, especially, you see the ring tempt people in like really obvious ways. It's like later you see Frodo battle the ring on more of a personal manner, but it's not this tempting of other people.
Well, I think it's a great setup to the other films, right? Because like the in the Two Towers, and of course with Return of the King, we see the ring's power, how it's captured Frodo, and how it still possesses Gollum, right? In later films. And so, but this is the tee up to that, the power of the ring. Like if those scenes don't happen, like I think that we get to Two Towers and Return of the King, and we see the scenes where like it's a struggle for Frodo to give it up, or we see Gollum just going all batshit nuts over this thing. Like it doesn't compute. Like it doesn't register with us. It's kind of like, really? Like it's just a fucking ring. Like Frodo's been carrying this around for like whatever. Everyone else has been, so like it does a great tee up of that.
Yeah. I think it's important in setting up that even when you don't see it, for the rest of the movies, anybody who's within like 10 feet of him, all that's on their mind is give me that ring.
Yeah. Like Faramir,
and
like later on.
Yeah. And Aragorn is the only one who fights it off the get up. But I think the implication is that in every movie, whoever he's having a conversation with is fighting that temptation because they know that they can't do that.
Right.
There's a greater mission at hand.
Yeah, and even like, well, I'm skipping all the way to the Return of the King here, but like Sam is like, I can't carry the ring, so I'm going to carry you, and literally picks him up and carries him towards Mount Doom
because he knows he can't take. He's not, I don't know, as pure of heart, I guess is the word for it, or the term.
And he's just like, I'm not even going to gamble. I'm just going to pick you up.
Yeah.
See, I think that's where Sam sells himself short. I think Sam could have done it because the greater fool, right? I mean, I know he's not also Tripp, but like he's dumb enough to not to be like, oh yeah, I could do something with this thing.
Yeah.
But it's also like when in Return of the King, when Frodo gets captured by the orcs after Shelob's lair, he actually does take it, and then he gives it back to Frodo. But it's not like this incredibly hard moment. Like if it weren't for the scenes in this first movie, that would have meant nothing. When he picks it up off of him and gives it back to him.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
So when I first saw this film in 2001, and Sean Bean was the character Boromir, right? All I could see when I watched him play Boromir was, oh, he's the fucking douchebag in Ronin who, is basically
won't shut up.
He won't shut up, and he plays the little boy to Robert De Niro's badass in that film. Have you ever seen Ronin, Sam?
I haven't, but I will tell you, when I first saw Sean Bean in this movie, like it's like, oh, this guy's going to die.
Oh,
no doubt about it.
Oh, you called it? Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, no, I saw the douchebag in Ronin, and I also saw the betrayer in GoldenEye, with Pierce Brosnan. So as James Bond in the '97 James Bond film GoldenEye. So like him being like the bad guy, I was like, oh, this is appropriate, because he's a twit in one movie and he's a bad guy in the other, so he's a traitor in the other. It's like totally makes sense. It lines up. Sean Bean's one of these actors that has grown on me over 20 years, and this character in particular.
Mhm.
And looking at the scope of the three films, like my opinion's different on who my favorite character is. But looking at the Fellowship of the Ring, I think my favorite character is Boromir. Is that weird?
I actually have a hard time disagreeing with you. Gandalf is this iconic character, and he always will be. But like, especially since I watched the first part of Two Towers today, where it goes into a little bit of Boromir's backstory, it's like you get to see this hero who was reluctant to even leave Gondor to go to this meeting to talk about the ring. He didn't even want to go. And you see him, he can't even help but fight the temptation because the ring is so powerful. He's definitely, in my opinion, one of the more complex characters, even in the whole series.
Yeah, I think this movie shows that he's not weak, but he's very reluctant of anything, and he second guesses himself, I guess. Which is why he's weak to the ring. He's comfortable at home doing his thing there. He doesn't want to go to the meeting. He thinks, somebody else can do that. And yeah, I think he is one of the more complex characters.
So, I really think like he really is my favorite. Like I was thinking about this. I have, like you guys saw in the notes, like I have Aragorn written down too. And like, I mean, it's really hard to not like Viggo Mortensen, right? It's just really difficult.
Yeah.
Like the dude's just a badass, and everything. And like when I first saw this film, like my mind went there, right? Like he's my guy. But like
exactly,
looking back 20 years and watching this film as many times as I have and everything, I really like Sean Bean's character and portrayal of Boromir. Like if you look at it just like, from the IMDb one sentence overview of what he is, like he's the guy who can't, he can't help but fight it, and he ends up sacrificing himself. It's so much more than that. He ends up sacrificing himself. He tells Aragorn, hey, you did what I could not do. He sacrifices himself for the two halflings, right? Pippin and Merry. He fights to the death to try and save them, and ultimately fails. I mean, this is just a crushing blow to him, right? And but like if we look at his character arc too, like what Sam referenced we get a little bit of his backstory in Two Towers, but when he goes on this journey, when he starts off on this journey, like he becomes like this big brother father-esque. He's training these hobbits to fight, and they have that scene on top of the mountain where they tackle him to the ground, and like they're wrestling with him, and you can tell at the end, like not necessarily Frodo, because Frodo represents the ring, right? So he can't have that level of effect, but he has a level of affection for Merry and Pippin, and it's it's pretty. And even like after Moria, right, where like was it Legolas who's like, okay, we got to go, and he's like, can you give him a second? Like they just lost they just lost Gandalf. Like, can we just fucking chill for a minute? Like, so I think there's a lot more depth to him than people like give him credit for, and I've learned to appreciate his character a lot more over the last 20 years.
Agreed. He was gonna be my pick.
I totally agree. He's one of the characters.
Go ahead, Sam.
He's one of those characters that you get to see him as who he is outside the context of the ring, like he's basically adopted Merry and Pippin, like as his own younger brothers. And then at the beginning of Two Towers, he's telling his dad, send Faramir to go to the meeting. Don't send me. And he loves his brother so much, even though his dad does not love his brother. And you get to see him as, you get to see his humanity before the ring corrupts him.
That shit's so brutal. That relationship, like Faramir and their father, the Steward of Gondor. Just, I can't even remember his name. I just know he's the Steward of Gondor. But like that dynamic is so brutal. It's I think it's really important to the arc of Boromir's story to later tell, like, yeah, he was the right man. Like, he was the right man to send, you know, and, you know, his ultimate sacrifice notwithstanding, I think got really overshadowed because all they, you know, when you see this for the first time, like I did, all you see is like, yeah, that douchebag tried to take the ring 5 seconds ago. Like, fuck that guy. You know, like, yeah, he should die. Like, fuck him. Like, but, you know, when you look at it as many times as we have over the last, you know, 2 decades, like he has incredible depth. And I think Sean Bean really does an incredible job with the character. We're going to get to recasting here in a minute. Like, that's the very next segment, but I don't know. Tripp, you said you agreed with me. He's your favorite. Boromir's your favorite?
Yeah, as a kid, it was always Aragorn, but especially on this last watch, Boromir, like just the journey he has, his reluctance at first, and his arc is, I don't want to do it, but I'll do it anyway. And then we can't go in there, but if you're going in there, I guess I have to go with you. And then ultimately, he, you know, starts to form a bond with the people he's traveling with, especially Merry and Pippin, and, you know, enough that he sacrifices himself. And he has, I mean, he has a better arc than some of the characters do in the whole series, but he definitely has the best arc in this movie.
Well, not to mention, but his love and affection for Aragorn, right? So they're at the council meeting, and he's like, well, fuck that guy. Gondor has no king. Like, what does a ranger know about this shit? Like, why are you even here? It goes from that to, you know, with his last dying breath, calling him brother. Like, that's, I mean, yeah, I mean, his arc is incredible. Peter Jackson did an incredible job with this. In retrospect, at the time, like I said, it's a complete write-off. And I think from the immaturity, the naivete of like me just watching the film for pure entertainment for the first time, yeah, it's like, yeah, he got what he deserved, kind of. But if you look like 20 years later, I look back, I'm like, God, man, what? Like, you feel almost kind of sorry for him.
Yeah.
Well, also, it's a huge credit to Peter Jackson, because in the books, Boromir doesn't die until the second book.
Oh, really?
The books end at different places. So the fact that he moved that forward, and he gave Boromir his end and his redemption in the first book as kind of the finale. It's phenomenal. Like, you couldn't have done that in a better way.
Agreed.
Awesome. Well, that's cool. I'm really surprised. I thought I was going to be weird. I thought I was going to be the one guy. I was like, yeah, Boromir is my favorite character. I didn't really think anyone would agree with me. That's pretty awesome.
Oh, I do want to give shout out to Gimli, though. Gimli's rad.
Yeah, Gimli. I love that. I love that dude, and not just because of the beard, but it's pretty awesome. So, all right. So that brings up our next segment, which is One Must Go. Okay. Which is always brought to you by United Cigars, featuring La Giana Havana and distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, and the highly acclaimed Atabey and Byron lines. Smoke one today and start living united. Okay, this is a little obvious, but I thought, you know, I think it's an appropriate One Must Go considering the subject for tonight. We were talking about how the Academy got it wrong. We're celebrating 20 years of the Fellowship of the Ring, but we've alluded to and brought up other films in this trilogy a couple of times, right? So here's the One Must Go, gentlemen. One must go. The whole series tells the story. But if you got to get rid of one, which one are you getting rid of? Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, or Return of the King? Now,
This is the toughest one must go you've ever thrown at me.
That's
What were you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say it's an obvious question to consider the subject, but it's not an easy answer.
Not at all.
And I'm going to participate too. I'm not putting you all on the spot here. So
Well, I mean, I'll be the first to answer. I'll bite the bullet. I love all three of these movies. Obviously, the first one does so much storytelling in terms of the Fellowship, but I think Fellowship has to go. I mean, The Two Towers and Return of the King are two of my favorite movies of all time, no question. And like, there's some performances in Fellowship, like we just talked about with Sean Bean, but I think it has to be Fellowship.
I'm gonna agree, purely because you can have a good story without a good beginning, but you can't have a good story without a good middle or end.
okay.
That's my reasoning, but it is really hard because I think Fellowship is one of my favorite movies in the series. I think it might be my favorite.
Okay, so Fellowship is your favorite, or
I think it is.
Okay,
I
so
love
which-
the beginning of the story. It just, I don't know, something about it.
okay, so which one has to go then?
Fellowship, even though it's
Still-
my favorite, it has to
Oh
go.
my gosh, okay, that's
like
funny.
I can't have this story without the end or the middle. I can only have it without the beginning.
Okay, so that's an interesting way of looking at it. Okay, great. Okay. So I'll be honest, my favorite of the three is The Two Towers. And I think one of the things in where this is Peter Jackson's brilliance, right? Is, up until about the early 2000s now, and this is where we start seeing a lot more series, right? We see the Marvel universe come to life, and a lot of sequels and trequels and quadruples and even prequels are coming into the Hollywood IP as we know it, right? And but prior to this, I mean, the common mantra, Sam, before you were born, again, not trying to be disparaging, but before you were born, like the common, like it was a known quantity, like when films were made, like sequels just never as good as the original, period. Like the one thing that kind of bucked the trend and even was a controversial take, at least when I was growing up, was The Godfather 2 being better than The Godfather, right?
Yeah.
Like that's probably like the only thing. Like everything else, like sequels are just bad. Like even Disney almost kind of made a joke of it, right? Like The Return of Jafar with Aladdin, Little Mermaid 2. Like, I mean, they're just bad films, like straight to video, like bad. Like didn't even release it in the theaters. That's how bad. I mean, they did it on purpose. It was almost intentional. Like, we're gonna milk this thing. Like, this is just a money game. This is a money grab. That's all we're doing here. But sequels are just bad. Peter Jackson took sequels and, I mean, he made it. Like you said, we can't have the trilogy without the middle and the end. So The Two Towers is my absolute favorite. I'll tell you why Return of the King has to go for me. It's the 12 endings at the end.
That part is rough.
Yeah,
it's just crushing, guys. Like I mean, I love the film and I love the series and everything, but at the end, like I was just like, fuck, is it over yet? Like what?
But by the third one, you're like, can it just end now? Please
Yeah.
end. I'm done. Like, I don't need anything else.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, the ring's destroyed, right? Mission accomplished. All right. Like I'm like Samwise at this point. Like, fuck it, we're done, right? Like
They could have ended it like this movie. Like he tosses the ring and like it's in midair and they just cut to black.
yeah. Perfect. Done. I think it's a better film. I think it's a better film if it ends that way. But I think Peter Jackson just had a hard time letting it go. And then he clearly had a hard time letting go because he turned King Kong into like a 5-hour biopic too. So
Well, I don't know if you guys have seen the Honest trailer, but they go into like 5 different endings of the Honest trailer for Lord of the Rings
Oh, really?
because of the 5 different endings in Return of the King. It's like, to me, Return of the King is an unbelievable film. And then at the end, you're like, what's going on here? Why are they doing this?
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely like I Return of the King has to go for me. I love, you know, for I think again, you know, 20 years ago when I finally saw the Return of the King, I would probably had said The Fellowship, because I didn't, to your point, Tripp, I didn't like the way it ended, like so abruptly, right? Like I just felt like it was an incompletion.
Yeah.
I mean, it got completed by these two films, but it was just like, ugh, it just felt so, it felt like this 3-hour saga that ended up being nothing, right? It ended up,
It was like one of those TV shows where they release like 2 or 3 episodes, and then the last one ends with a cliffhanger and you have to wait a week, only you had to wait a whole year.
Right. It was just, but I mean, it got people to come back too. That was the crazy thing too. It's just like you knew what you were doing a year from then. Like you had it on your calendar.
Oh yeah.
And
But I think you're right about the sequel angle. I just wanted to make a comment about that. Like the way that sequels were always like the second one is never as good as the first. I think the reason for that is that the second one is always bigger and better, and you know that's what it has to be in order to be a sequel. Until this movie,
yeah,
this series of movies completely changed the way sequels worked, because then you could have a pitch that says, we're not making one movie, we're making 3 movies. If the first one does okay, 5 years later we'll make the second one, but they've already built a story. And
right,
for 100 years almost every movie was a encapsulated story that didn't need anything else. This was a different type of movie that hadn't really been done before, other than Star Wars, I guess. But even Star Wars doesn't end on a huge cliffhanger. Like Star Wars A New Hope has an end. Like if that was the only movie, it would still be a good movie.
yeah, absolutely. I'm with it. All right, so that was as hard as that was, Tripp. I mean, you were still able to answer it. That was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that was brutal.
Hard.
I know it was brutal for both of you. I appreciate it. So, and that was our One Must Go segment, brought to you by United Cigars, featuring La Giana Havana, distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, and the highly acclaimed Atabey and Byron lines. Smoke one today and start living united. So, so this brings up the next segment, guys. So we're this kind of debate and discuss. But I wanted to tackle the idea of recasting. So I'm going to leave it up to you guys. I'm going to let you vote. So I have actual considerations that people were actually like either auditioned or considered for other roles. We can discuss those, or we can do that first, or we can do who would you recast? So which order do you guys want to go in? Do you want to talk about actual considerations first, or do you want to talk about who you would recast and with whom?
Either way works for me.
Sam, you want to decide and vote on it?
I'll go for it. Let's go actual first, because I'd never seen these before. I'd never actually looked at
neither had I.
Who was considered or who auditioned for this role.
Okay. So let's talk about Aragorn first, because I think he's interesting. So Aragorn, so Viggo Mortensen is actually the role is going to Stuart Townsend, which is not in the notes, and I apologize. I ambushed you guys here. The role is going to Stuart Townsend. Stuart Townsend is going to be Aragorn. It's done, signed, sealed, delivered. The contract is done, everything. We're talking days before an initial filming starts. Peter Jackson calls an audible, says, you know what? I want to go older, because again, tearing up I forgot what kind of superpower Aragorn has where he doesn't age, but he wants to make him a little bit older. So he goes with Viggo Mortensen. Viggo Mortensen's kids actually talk him into it. So Viggo Mortensen becomes Aragorn. And it's the life-changing role that he has. And Viggo Mortensen had some pretty cool roles before this, but nothing like this, right? But here are, other than Stuart Townsend getting the job before Viggo Mortensen ultimately took it over, here's who was considered for Aragorn. Daniel Day-Lewis. Okay. I could see that. Russell Crowe, who turned it down for A Beautiful Mind. Turned it down. Russell Crowe turns it down to do A Beautiful Mind. Here's the one that's just going to crush both of you guys. Nicolas Cage.
Oh God.
No,
Oh, that would have been terrible.
Actually
absolutely
considered.
not.
Yes, actually considered for the role. Like, made it all the way to like him being. I think there was an offer sheet made, maybe. Like that's bad. That is
Yeah.
bad.
This movie would not have been the same with Nicolas Cage. For me, like, recasting is always hard to imagine, because when somebody plays a character, it's not like just swapping their face and their voice. It's like their mannerisms change, their the kind of the backstory that they play can change.
Right.
So it's hard to just say how somebody would do in a role, but I cannot see Nicolas Cage working.
I don't like Russell Crowe.
I wouldn't like him in it.
I
either.
absolutely hate Nicolas Cage. That would just been. Daniel Day-Lewis doesn't upset me.
I could see him working.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like he's the one that we're saying like, yeah, I could see that working, but none of these guys were like, man, that'd be a great fit.
Yeah.
It's just like two that are terrible, and then one that's like, okay, that might work.
So you know who auditions for the role, and probably gets turned down flat, but who auditions for the role? Vin Diesel,
Vin Diesel.
which Peter
Could've been the
Jackson
star of
probably
the
said,
movie if he
"We'll
had
let you
gotten
know."
it.
Like we'll keep your application on file. That's what Peter Jackson tells Vin Diesel, right? Like, we'll keep your application on file.
Yeah.
Like,
That would have ruined the movie.
I think there's a place in Lord of the Rings for Vin Diesel. I don't know where he goes. It's not any one of the main characters, like major main characters. But like, I think there's a place. I think there's a place for Vin Diesel somewhere in the Tolkien universe.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe the
It's
witch.
definitely-
Maybe the Witch King. You know.
Yeah, like something like that could work for
Yeah.
Vin Diesel.
Or just like
Or just an orc.
an orc general. What's his name in the third movie? I think it's like Gothmog or something. That could work.
Right.
But Aragorn, absolutely not.
Yeah, no.
I'm just
no way.
mixing Fast and Furious and Lord of the Rings in my mind right now,
Yeah, exactly.
and it's not
Me too.
good.
It was offered to Russell Crowe. He turns it down to do A Beautiful Mind.
So after the first movie, he must have been like, "Damn, I made a great decision."
Right. Yeah. Because Beautiful Mind does so well.
And then 2 years later, you're like,
Oh shit. What the
"Oh
fuck did I do?"
shit."
Yeah. Well, you just know at some point during like Fellowship, like he sneaks in the line, like, "What you do in life echoes in eternity." You know, you just know it comes in somewhere. Which I hate to poke fun of. Like, it's one of my favorite lines. I love Russell Crowe, and I love The Gladiators. We know, Sam and I did the pod back in, early in the fall and everything. So it's great film. Yeah, but Russell Crowe's Aragorn, just bad take. All right, so let's go over to Frodo. Well, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
But just imagine Russell Crowe with Aragorn's hair.
Yeah, that's the thing that like is going to keep me up at night.
I can't imagine Russell Crowe with anything longer than maybe like he doesn't have long hair in anything, I don't think.
Didn't he have long hair in Master and Commander?
Yeah, in a ponytail.
Oh, he did.
Yeah,
You're
good
right.
call.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
had a
he looked-
ponytail.
Oh, and then in Les Miserables too, right? Same kind of look.
Yeah.
Same look. Same look. So let's go over to Frodo. Dominic Monaghan, who actually gets cast as Merry, auditions for the role.
I do think he would have looked better with Frodo's hair than he does with his hair.
It's not a bad take, right?
No, that's not a bad one.
It's not terrible.
I'd be able to live with that one.
So the early favorite for this role, for Frodo, Peter Jackson actually hand select this young actor at the time to do this. The actor comes in, does the audition, and bombs. And I can't remember, like, there's stories behind this. Either he tried to do a British accent and just was terrible, or didn't do a British accent. I don't know why Elijah Wood doesn't have a British accent, but something. I mean, he just bombed, and that was Jake Gyllenhaal.
Elijah Wood in the movie has like a vaguely British accent.
Yeah, a little bit. There's a little bit there, but it's not like some obvious the other ones that are natural.
I cannot even see Jake Gyllenhaal with an accent at all.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
I don't think he would have worked.
He's done so many
No.
roles over the years. Like over the past 20 years, Jake Gyllenhaal's one of the more accomplished actors in Hollywood.
Yeah.
I still only see him as Donnie Darko, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, he was incredible in that film, but that's all I see at Jake Gyllenhaal is Donnie Darko. I don't know. Maybe it's just weird, but yeah, I didn't like that. I didn't like that. But apparently that was Peter Jackson's pick. He wanted Jake Gyllenhaal, and he just bombed the audition. Apparently, just bombed it.
I guess maybe he really liked Donnie Darko because Donnie Darko was like 2 years before this.
I think
so. It would have been like when they were casting, Donnie Darko was going on.
Yeah. All right, so Gandalf up next, right? So you want to talk about a cavalcade of icons rolling in for this, right?
Icons that I could not see playing him, but go ahead.
So Sean Connery turns it down, saying, "I just don't get the role. Like I don't get it. Like I don't get it."
Wow.
Sean Connery turns it down. Patrick Stewart, Sam Neill, who actually played a wizard in the TV making of the Merlin, by the way, shortly after Jurassic Park. I gotta say, I don't hate the Sam Neill pick. I definitely hate I'm a Sean Connery guy. I definitely hate Sean Connery in this role.
Yeah, I just could not see him as Gandalf.
I totally agree. Sean Connery, icon.
Fly, you fools.
I love Sean Connery, but that's a terrible fit.
Yeah, so Sean Connery tells Samwise Gamgee to winners go home and fuck the prom queen. Patrick Stewart with hair, weird.
Yeah, that's the part that I wouldn't be able to get behind.
Yeah,
him with like long gray hair just wouldn't work for me.
No.
It wouldn't even look like Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, just be like, who's that guy? He looks familiar. I don't hate the Sam Neill pick though. I don't hate it. I don't know.
I feel like at the time he could have done it.
Yeah,
he could have fit. But
I think Ian McKellen, is Gandalf. Like,
yeah,
just is.
100%. I just looked up Sam Neill because I was curious. Like, man, who's Sam Neill? Now I see his face. Of course, I recognize him.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah. But the first thing that comes up, New Zealand actor. Like this entire series was shot in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
That's hilarious.
Right. So Orlando Bloom passes on Faramir to play Legolas. And but who was also considered for Legolas? Ethan Hawke. We talked about him earlier.
My initial question is, it's like he passed on a lesser role for a bigger role.
Part.
It's like, well, Orlando Bloom definitely made the.
Yeah, he
did.
Definitely made the right call.
Yeah, I can't see anyone else playing Orlando Bloom's character. Like I can't see, like Legolas is Orlando Bloom. Like I have trouble seeing Orlando Bloom in other films.
Me too.
Like it's just weird.
I think that like I feel like I feel like he would have been weird as Faramir. I was going to comment on who else could have played Legolas, but I assume we'll get to that.
So we talked about how the show is dedicated to my sister who introduced me to these films, right? So Orlando, she loves Orlando Bloom and she loves Legolas. She loves the character. That's probably, if we asked her who her favorite was, it probably would have been Legolas. If I characterized my sister correctly. But one of the films in history of film that like angers my sister more than anything else in the world is Troy. Not because of how good or bad the film is, one could argue, but Orlando Bloom's character as Paris, and how he's just such a pansy.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, you just hate the guy.
Just
the whole
a
movie.
coward. Yeah, just an absolute coward. Just unbelievable. Like, just bad. Like, I mean, like Orlando Bloom did a really great job in the Pirates of the Caribbean series, right?
Mm-hmm.
But all I see when I watch him, when I'm watching those films, as much as I really like it, and Johnny Depp carries those films.
Black.
Yeah, exactly. Johnny Depp carries those films. Like, let's make no mistake about it. But you know, Bloom's character is obviously, you know, Will Turner is obviously a prominent role in those films, but it's still weird. I'm just like, oh, it's just Legolas. Like,
yeah, he's one of the ones that like, I think part of it is that when they were casting elves, like they chose people who had those features, which Orlando Bloom does, like, smooth face, kind of like pointy nose, and you have to look like an elf to play an elf.
right.
And unfortunately for him, he looks too much like an elf to play a human.
There's this like Ethan Hawke is too rugged. I think you just nailed it. Like like you almost have to be boyish to play Legolas.
Yeah, exactly.
I think. But he still has this kind of this badassery about him, which is interesting. He I don't know. He does a great job with the role. I think it's just pretty fantastic about it. So there's this joke that I've always made about Sean Bean, about how he's just basically just like his job is just to die in films.
Oh yeah, that's
like,
that's a well-known fact.
Yeah, that's just his job. So another character for me for the longest time who had the same kind of trope, if you will, Liam Neeson.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was his job, was to die in films. Like he was Qui-Gon Jinn, he dies twice in Batman Begins, right? And like, I mean, he finally actually survives an entire film barely in Taken. So like, like he just, Liam Neeson just dies. Like that was my joke with him. Liam Neeson was actually considered for Boromir.
I could kind of see that working. That's like one of the ones that like, it wouldn't have killed the movie for me if they had changed between movies. Like that's how I'm trying to put these in context for my mind, is like, if we had seen one version and then it switched to a different actor. That's the only way I can imagine other people in this movie.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard to recast. Yeah, it's hard to recast Sean Bean because he did such a phenomenal job in this role.
Yeah.
Like all the praise we just gave him earlier. It's like there's other people that were like, I mean, Frodo's Frodo. I mean, he has like no memorable parts at all. But it's like Sean Bean is, probably the least important person in the Fellowship. And the role he plays is unbelievable that you will never forget him.
Right. Absolutely. I don't hate it. Like, it's not one of those things like, oh God, it's not Nicolas Cage bad, right? It's not even
exactly.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's not Russell Crowe or Patrick Stewart bad. Patrick Stewart as Gandalf, right? Like just Patrick Stewart with facial hair or hair of any kind is just weird. So Arwen, played by Liv Tyler, she's going to come up in a second here for me. Actually, just spoiler alert, when we talk about who we want to recast, I'd want to recast Arwen. Liv Tyler in the role, just, I don't know, but we'll get to that in a second. Helen Bonham Carter considered. Don't like that one either.
Yeah, I love Helena Bonham Carter. I don't feel like she has those elfish features.
You know who was going to go to, but she had to turn it down for pregnancy reasons. And I love this. Uma Thurman.
She would have been awesome. I'm a little bummed that didn't end up happening.
Yeah, I love that pick. She could have also swapped out for Kate Blanchett's Galadriel too. By the way, I would have been okay with that too.
Mm-hmm.
Feelings on Liv Tyler, Sam? What do you think?
You know, it's definitely the obvious choice if you recast one of the characters. It's like the other ones, we all kind of agree. It's like absolutely no question they picked the right person. But Liv Tyler's like, oh yeah, you could put someone else in this role.
So let's actually segue this into the who would we recast, because there's another consideration that I would totally recast, even though I love the person who played the character. So yeah, Arwen is probably the easiest one to recast, and look, Liv Tyler didn't do a terrible job, right? She's not bad, but she is. I don't know.
To me, she's flat. I would call it flat. Like she's just boring.
Well, yeah,
portrayal of the character.
Yeah, it's not like Frodo flat, right? Like Frodo has this. I mean, Frodo's the vessel, right, in which the ring has to be transported. You know, like so. You know, they're. You know, Frodo doesn't. You know, Elijah Wood doesn't have to. He doesn't have to have like these layers to him. Like we learned the backstory of so many characters. We don't learn the backstory about Frodo because you don't need to. It's not important.
Right.
Right.
Frodo's kind of intended to be the blank character, so that I think so that the audience has someone to identify with in this like legion of badasses that's, you know, stewarding him around Middle Earth. He's supposed to be the one that you identify with, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with that. He's just this average hobbit who kind of gets thrown into really unfortunate circumstances because Bilbo picked up a ring.
Yeah. I'll tell you, talking about like fine acting moments, just to get off subject for 2 seconds, like, you know, when they're at the secret council meeting and Frodo pipes up and says, I'll take the ring. And you see Ian McKellen's face, Gandalf, just this defeat. He closes his eyes and he's like, fuck. I really didn't want this for this poor kid. And it shows to what we were talking about earlier about how like Ian McKellen, like Gandalf doesn't give a shit about anybody except for Bilbo and Frodo.
Yeah.
And it just like the defeat on his face. That's one of the best 2 seconds in this film, period. Where it's just like this crushing blow to his soul is right there.
He's like, God damn it. I already put one hobbit through enough shit. And now I got to put another one through this hell.
Yeah, exactly.
Unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, I you know who also I like is go back to the subject though. You know who I also like is Arwen, Jennifer Connelly. Speaking of A Beautiful Mind, right?
Mm-hmm. I could see her as it.
If we want to like talk about dark-haired, you know, actresses of the age, right? I think she brings more depth to the Arwen role than Liv Tyler.
Yeah, I think so too.
You know?
Well, I also think that it's like without the Arwen role in the movie, like if the character is just not there, is the movie drastically different?
Well,
Nope.
here's a take for you guys. Do you believe? I mean, there's some. They go to great lengths to convince you of this fact, but do you believe the Aragorn Arwen love story in terms of Viggo and Liv? Do you believe it? I don't. Like I don't.
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Bear.
Yeah.
It's just like the more I think about it, it's like I don't think Aragorn really needed a love story. Like you put one in there, like they butcher it when they try to put a love story in The Hobbit. They absolutely butcher it. This one, they didn't butcher it as bad, but it's like Aragorn has enough depth of character that I don't think you needed this random love story in it that didn't really move the plot forward.
He has the plight of mankind on his shoulders. I mean, what the fuck else does he need?
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's exactly it, is that they gave him a love interest to humanize him a little more, but you don't really need that.
He has the plight of mankind. He has the it goes without saying that throughout these three films and through the story of it, like man is just the stepchild of Middle Earth. Like fucking nobody likes them. Like nobody has respect for them. They're just nothing but greedy, power hungry assholes. And he represents that. Like, yeah, I mean, he's got that on his shoulders. Now he's got to save the fucking planet. You know, he himself knows the weakness that he has in his own heart. He knows he can't do it. He can't carry the ring. So he's got to prepare, he's got to protect this halfling. And then he has to do, and then the gut wrenching scene of like like Sam described it earlier, folding his fingers over the ring, Frodo's hands over the ring, and letting him go. I mean, God, there's enough depth there to last a lifetime. Yeah. And then like just love story to an actress. Like, it's just not believable. Like, I don't believe that they're in love, really.
Yeah.
Like, and they go through so many painstaking moments throughout the three films to try and convince you like, oh, this is a love story for the ages. This is Romeo and Juliet on steroids. And it's like, just terrible. I don't know. I don't like it at all. Like she's like one of the most inconsequential characters in my opinion.
To me, it's one of the biggest misses in the whole trilogy.
Yeah. I could see, but again, and this isn't my own like personal attraction towards like Jennifer Connelly over Liv Tyler, but I could see Jennifer Connelly or Uma Thurman being that that light at the end of the tunnel for him.
Yeah.
I could see better chemistry, I guess. The chemistry just wasn't
chemistry.
there.
That's the problem is that I feel like Liv Tyler has no chemistry, but I kind of feel like she has no chemistry in any movie she's in, like in romantic scenes, like Armageddon. I feel like she had no chemistry with, was it Ben Affleck that was her boyfriend? I don't remember.
In Armageddon?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That was all.
Like,
also
she just
terrible.
has no on-screen chemistry.
Also terrible, and I like that film a lot. Like guilty pleasure, right? Totally guilty pleasure film. I love that film. And I thought she nailed it though. Armageddon. I thought she nailed the scene where, I mean, Bruce Willis fucking dials it up and he's incredible when he says goodbye to his daughter and then she's like there with her hand on the screen. Like that fucking shit's powerful. But like, yeah. Like the love story,
romantic chemistry with them.
Yeah, the love story between her and Ben Affleck's just awful. Like the whole animal cracker scene, I could let go a lifetime without ever seeing that again. That'd be great. So here's a funny one. This was actually considered, but Peter Jackson said that he was too famous and he would overshadow the film. So I love Hugo Weaving. I love him. V for Vendetta, one of my favorite films of all time, and he's fucking amazing in it. But Hugo Weaving plays Elrod, the king of the elves, right? But he was actually the second choice. The first choice, and Peter Jackson decided to go with Hugo Weaving because he thought this person was too famous and would take over the role. David Bowie.
I kind of agree with him. Like David Bowie would have been super cool as Elrod.
I fucking loved it though.
It would have been awesome. But also the entire theater would go, "That's fucking David Bowie" in the middle of the movie. You can't have that.
Right. I mean, but can you just see David Bowie at the fucking like battlefront in the opening scene? Like, oh my God, that would be the best thing ever.
That would have been rad.
That would have been badass. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Tripp on this one. It would have been completely badass, but Elrond would have become way too big of a character in people's minds because it was David Bowie.
True story. So I think good call by Peter Jackson there. Like good call, but like I think that would have been fun. That one would have been fun.
Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah.
I would give anything to see, like, if he had done some test screening or test auditions or like costume auditions with him. I would kill to see that. But I know that didn't happen. So
it's funny you bring up test scenes. So this is a guy who was not mentioned. This is Bear's mind exploring something. interchange Mary, Pippin, or Samwise Gamgee with Jack Black?
It has to be Pippin if you're picking one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he could be Pippin for sure.
Yeah.
He couldn't do Samwise. Samwise has too much emotion for Jack Black.
No,
at
he's
that
too
time.
serious of a character.
A little bit too serious, yeah. But I he could have nailed that fucking trimming of the hedge thing. Like, I ain't dropping no eaves, sir. Like,
I ain't dropping no eaves, sir.
he would. I think he would. I don't know. That's just my mind being like, hey, this would have been fun. Like, it just him to be like either Mary or Pippin, I think.
Or just imagine Jack Black after Mary says, well, how many of the bread did you eat? 4.
That would have taken a small amount of comedy out of that scene, though, because part of the thing that's funny is that Mary ate so much and he's still like a tiny, skinny hobbit.
Right. Well, when they first enter, when they're on their journey and they run into him in that cornfield, and they're making off with this farmer's like horde of like cabbages and carrots and I mean, just geez, man. And they're like that's what there's like that's always like on their mind and stuff. I'm like, it's just food in general. It's just crazy.
It's true. And it's just a little later. Can you imagine just Jack Black saying, well, what about second breakfast?
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Like I feel like, I don't know. I think it would be fun. Like, I don't think it would have taken away from the film either. Like, there's these comic actors that like would just be like, you can't put Robin Williams anywhere in this film. Like, he just overtakes it, right? He's just that dominant of like, there's this interesting thing about comedic actors in comedic roles in serious films where they dominate the screen. They just own it too much.
And it feels like it's trying to be a comedy.
Yeah.
It needs to be dialed back a little bit, like it is in this movie, where like there are parts of this movie that are hilarious.
Right.
But it's never like too funny. But it keeps it from feeling too serious at the same time.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So speaking of funny, this is one of my favorite segments. And I'm eager to hear yours. I mean, I have a couple. But I think, I'm going to let you guys go on this. I think this is going to be fun. Nitpicks. So nitpicks of the film, like what 20 years later, what has you like rolling your eyes? What has you like questioning? We've brought up a couple a little bit along the way and stuff, but I'm really eager to hear this. Sam, you and I were texting a little bit about this. Sam, I'm going to let you lead it off with one. So Sam, you got the floor. I want to hear a couple of your biggest nitpicks. Go ahead and lead off with one right here.
All right. Well, the first one, when the Fellowship of the Ring gathers in Rivendell, what on earth convinced the dwarves or the elves that it would be a great idea to take 4 hobbits on this journey?
Right.
Like, I get the one is the ring bearer, but these other 3 are just dragging you down. Like, if you're just viewing it from the beginning,
right,
you're basically taking 4 children.
I mean, the fact that they weren't like Merry and Pippin go home doesn't make any sense. As much as I love those characters, it doesn't make sense.
They have iconic moments in later movies, but it's like, why would you take them? Like, just for fun? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, they serve absolutely no purpose. We talk about, I mean, obviously Samwise has to go, right? He has to go because of his importance and role. And then it harkens back to Gandalf's call of him, like, don't you lose him, And so that part when he comes up into the meeting still, like, and Elrod almost chuckles, is like, well, yeah, apparently you can't leave him by your side because he even, he showed up to a secret meeting and you did too when you weren't even invited. So like, it just, but children accompanying on. And even like Billy Boyd's comment at the end of that, right? Like it's in the ad, I put the ad that I created for the show, right? He's like, okay, so where are we going? Billy Boyd in this scene, like he dials it up. It's pretty awesome. Like he's pretty incredible in this like little like 2-minute run in the secret council meeting. It's pretty awesome. I love Billy Boyd in this. But yeah, huge gap in the film. Like, why are these kids on this journey? I'm with you, Sam, 100%. Tripp, what about you?
It doesn't make any sense.
One of my early nitpicks in the movie that I don't remember disliking it at the time, but part of it is like the unnecessary addition of this part, and part of it is that the effect has aged so bad, which is the part where they're smoking their pipes and Gandalf blows like the ring and then the little ship that goes through it. Like, it's so pointless, and the effect has just aged terribly. Like, the way that thing flies out of his mouth and then stops and forms and then just zooms forward doesn't make any sense. Like, that one little thing bugs me. I don't know why. But again, these are nitpicks. So
Right, yeah. So I forgot that it was Bilbo's 111th birthday. For some reason, I just thought it was his 100th birthday. I had that posted in my head for like the longest time, and I've seen this film, I don't know, countless times. Easily in the 30s, like the amount of times that I've actually seen this film. Easily. And for somehow I forgot there was. Why are they celebrating his 111th birthday? I mean, I get that
I assume it's just because it's hilarious that like it's such an obscure number. Like, why would you pick that? That's what makes it funny.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, that makes it 11D1.
Yeah,
doesn't he call it in the movie?
11D1. Yeah. And then his little speech about how he doesn't know as many people as he should, and then likes half of them as like that whole fractionary. Like, it's comical because I'm 37 years old now. I still can't follow it. I'm like, I still don't understand what you just said.
It's I'm trying to remember what it is. It's something like, I know half of you. I know most of you have half as well as I should, and I like half of you. I don't know. I lost
more
it
than you
already.
deserve. Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And they just like pause. They're like, were we just insulted?
Yeah, like, well, as they said in the like introduction of the movie, they're not the brightest, they're not the brightest bulbs in the shed, hobbits in general, right? No, oh gosh. All right, so here's mine. All right, they need to destroy this fucking ring, right? Like, that needs to happen like yesterday, right? That's the whole point of this entire. Why the fuck are they walking everywhere?
Yeah, horses definitely exist.
The eagles, Tripp. The eagles.
Oh, and the eagles. I forgot about those.
Come on.
Let's fly minutes before. Gandalf summons eagles with a moth. But no, we can't do it for this. That's not feasible.
Yeah, I mean, listen. If the eagles can't go into Mordor because it's just like, at least drop you off at the gate.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, let's speed this up a little. I mean, at
the very least, drop them off at that mountain edge where the movie ends.
Yeah,
it's true.
I mean, Gandalf's got some magic. I mean, he can create some kind of parachute, right? I mean, the eagles don't even have to land; they can just jump off the eagle.
That's true.
Yeah. Why do they walk everywhere?
Because it's more boring.
Even in The Hobbit, like the beginning of The Hobbit, at least they have ponies. Like, they ride off on ponies.
Yeah. I mean, because you think about it. I mean, also, speed notwithstanding the fact that you walk everywhere, but then you have like some of the least athletic people going on this quest, right? I mean, speed of foot is not something you think of when you think of hobbits. Or poor Gimli, right? Like, especially like how like Two Towers opens up. It's like, Aragorn and like Legolas are just like, I feel like they're just like, I mean, they don't want to say it, but like Gimli's like holding them back, like, as far as like running is concerned. Like,
what's the quote? Like, us dwarves are wasted on cross country.
Yeah, we're natural sprinters. Yeah.
On that note as well, somebody like make the hobbits some shoes. Like, I know they got these rough and tumble feet, but wouldn't you want to be wearing shoes like walking through caves and stuff, even if you had like tough feet?
Well, the
I would think so.
swamplands, and I mean, God, dude, the gangrene is happening
Yeah, exactly.
multiple times. You know, I'm pretty
These
sure
dudes are walking around barefoot.
malaria has set in at some point to a couple of these guys. Like,
Also, those feet would stink. Like halfway there, man. Walking through swamps and just walking all day for months.
well, they walk
It
through
would be rough.
farmland for like the first 20
Oh, yeah.
minutes. You know, like, I mean, think about all that manure that they're stepping through. I mean, it just yuck. I mean, that stench probably like turns my stomach more than the thought of like the Oracai's breath, you know.
Yeah.
That's totally true. I don't know about you guys, but I got 3 more nitpicks.
Yeah, no,
written
I've got to
down
talk.
right
I got
now.
to like. I mean, we could have spent a show on fucking nitpicks, here's the best part about this: we love the film. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, like we love this film. We absolutely do. It's an incredible film. We love the 3 of us love it. That's why we're doing the show. Let's say I'm like, look, go ahead, lay on a couple more. I have one too. I think I have one like major one that I want to hit. But what's your next one?
Well, the next one is, do the elves just say "fuck it" when it gets hard and leave? It's just like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, Sauron's back. Yeah, we're out. Y'all got this. We're just gonna bounce. Like,
Yeah,
I know
it's like
this
we're
ring is
leaving.
vitally
We're leaving
important.
this world, man. Like, get Arwen out of your head. Put your mind on the quest, Aragorn. Like, fuck you. We're
Mhm.
leaving. Yeah, we're out. Peace.
Yeah, we have an army you could totally use, but we're just gonna bounce. That's cool, right?
We're just gonna take off. If that's cool with you guys.
Because I think it's fair to say like the elves are like the baddest beings on the good side, right? Like,
Oh, absolutely. It's like, oh, we fought this dude once. We're not doing it again.
so I'm gonna pull a nitpick from the Hobbit too. So like the Legolas has like this, like each film he has like this one trick that he does, right? And in the Fellowship, it's like he hops on the head of the cave troll, and a couple of things like like that. That's like the badass move that he does. He does the little flip off the onto the horse in Two Towers when they're getting attacked by those dog-like creatures, and then he also slides down the staircase on a shield, and like takes out like 4 Orcai. Like he has like one little trick per like movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the Hobbit, like it's like every 5 seconds. It drives me nuts. It's
And
like,
the goddamn crazy part is he's not even in the book.
yeah, I know. And they bring him back. It's like, oh God, that's just stupid. So dumb. Yeah.
One of my other nitpicks
Yeah, go ahead.
is the this is more of a filmmaking nitpick. The like sacrificing yourself and then T-posing is so overdone that I was done with it when I was 17 and I saw this movie. Like, you don't have to do that every time. Like, we get it. He sacrificed himself.
The Jesus pose. Yeah.
The Jesus pose, like, we all get it. He sacrificed himself just like Jesus. You don't need to do that in every movie.
It's like Platoon, William Dafoe, like they made it infamous, and then like
Yeah.
for the next like 30 years, it's like, oh, everyone that dies, like Neo in the Matrix, Boromir, just everyone that dies in a sacrifice for the greater good. It's like, oh, yep, let's do the metaphor of the cross. Okay, yep, we get it. Yep, he died for everybody else.
Yeah, you're like,
Thank you.
oh, he died for them. Now I get it.
Now I get
That
thank
wouldn't
you.
have made any sense to me.
Yeah, I couldn't have possibly connected those dots had you not done the cross pose. Thank you so much for
Yeah. Perhaps my biggest one is it's the one ring to rule them all, right? Does that shit just not affect the elves? Because Galadriel has a ring and she talks about it. And then it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. She's got one of the rings.
Yeah.
It's like, apparently the men, you're all screwed. No, doesn't talk about the dwarves. But she's chill with it. Like, yeah, she's got a ring, but it's okay.
Yeah, it's all good. She still has it. It's all good. So the dwarves, the dwarves, like Moria gets taken out. Men turn into those wraiths, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, but she's fine.
Yeah, just totally fine. it's not even mentioned besides the fact that she has one. And it's just like, what? That just doesn't make sense.
She's not getting ruled. Let's just put it that way. I mean, she's just kind of living her best life in the woods there.
Well, before she just leaves.
Yeah, before they just say, fuck it, I'm out. Yeah. I love that one. I love that take. Yeah. I was like, the going gets tough. You know what? It's okay. We're we're done. We're good.
Yeah, the going gets tough, we get going.
Yeah. Middle Earth wouldn't be that bad with a scorched earth, Sauron leading the, being the dominant force in our existence. That's fine. We can live with that. We'll be off riding some ship to, the metaphorical heaven or whatever. Bastards. Okay, so the first half of the Secret Council meeting, like, fucking Gandalf has to wield the words of Sauron to get Boromir from stopping to touching this ring. They basically all but ignore him when he's talking about how fucking, Mordor is,
Mordor.
Yeah, is awful. Like, there's evil there, does not sleep. Like, no, dude, we get it. Yeah, it's a shitty place. We're gonna send the fucking Hobbit. It's fine. Like they cast him asunder. Like, and they spend the entire first half of this meeting just diminishing him, making him feel like shit. Aragorn calls him out like, dude, you can't wield it. Nobody can. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it a good idea to let him come along? He's the one that's shown the most weakness. Why is he on the Fellowship? Why is he in the Fellowship? Why they let him? You talked about the kids coming along, Sam. Why is Boromir on there?
That's a great question. Apparently, they were just taking volunteers because no one wanted to go.
Yeah. Yeah, they would take anyone they could get, I guess, because they're taking kids. They're taking this guy who doesn't even trust himself.
But it's also like they don't listen to him the first half of the speech. He's the only guy that's fought Mordor in the past 3,000 years.
Yeah, because the elves are fucking hiding in Rivendell. Aragorn's shirking his responsibilities. Being basically the teenager of the group, right?
Yep.
Yeah. 100%.
And that's the rebellious teenager.
It's completely overlooked. It's he's just run away from responsibility his entire life.
Yeah.
Oh, but he's the best.
Yeah. So here's something that I watched, because I was editing the ad, right? So I watched this scene several times over and over again, which made me fall in love with Boromir more and more. So the Secret Council meeting, right? Nobody but the major characters, right? Nobody but the Fellowship and Elrod show any emotion.
I mean, they don't even talk, do they?
They don't. No one talks. No one no one gets crazy.
They're like that guy in a meeting who's just on his phone the whole time.
Yeah. They're like, well, why are these fucking guys here? It should have just been the Fellowship and Elrod just saying, you guys got to do this.
Well, it's especially the men that are there. It's who are they that they're that important? Rohan has a king. He's not there. Gondor has no king. So he sent Boromir.
Right.
And Aragorn's there. It's those are the only people that make sense to be there. Who the hell are these guys?
Yeah. What jerks are they, man? They didn't volunteer. They're like, oh yeah, I guess you guys got this. We'll let the outspoken weak guy represent us. I guess it says a lot about them. Oh man. So I mean, I have a couple of others. Sam, you said that was your biggest one, but do you have any other, Tripp, do you have any more?
I have one more.
Okay.
I got one more too. But go ahead.
This is a true nitpick, and I don't know whether it's something that didn't carry over well to 4K or what, but Faramir's wig looks awful compared to everybody else. Everybody else has they look like they haven't showered in months. like you would look in these kinds of conditions. And Faramir looks like he just finished using his Head and Shoulders and blow dried his hair.
That's why his
And
dad
it just
hates him.
looks like it just looks weird. And it doesn't look that way in any of the other movies, I don't think. Or I just don't remember it. But like as soon as I saw him, I was like, what a bad wig. Like it looks like a wig that was sitting in his closet for a couple years. It's a bad wig, man.
Sam, what about you?
So my other one is the scene in Moria where Gandalf tells, I think it's Frodo, that Gollum has been following them for several days.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right. So one, how the hell did he follow them for several days when the entrance collapsed behind them? Two, how does he follow them after that when the bridge collapses and there's goblins and a Balrog everywhere? That doesn't make any sense. It's like, did he come from the other direction and then just somehow get past the bottomless pit of despair and all of these goblins? No problem.
I had never thought about that. He can like climb on walls though, right?
Yeah, but yeah, he gets
still.
he gets in and out of shit. But here's the nitpick that follows that. He gets out of all this shit, right? He couldn't escape Mordor when they're torturing him.
Yeah.
Like he couldn't get out of that jam. But yeah, he can get away from the goddamn demon in the middle of Moria, right? That's okay.
Yeah, but and then follow them through an impassable doorway that they couldn't turn around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did he hear the password? Did he overhear the password? So he's able to get in. I don't know.
He got past the Kraken monster thing.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a nitpick about the Mines of Moria too, right? So they escape from that little room, right? They defeat everybody in that room and they get out, and then like that awakens the belly of the beast of the like all these other goblins and orcs and shit, and like they're all coming out of like, and they're completely surrounded. The what's the demon called again?
Balrog.
The Balrog.
The Balrog. Okay, so the Balrog, yeah, sorry. He starts coming in. They all scatter, right? And the fucking Fellowship just sits there like, oh yeah, everything's all good. Like,
yeah, Gandalf just thinks about it for a second.
yeah, he thinks so. That's the nitpick, right? He thinks about it, and everyone's like looking like, what's this? And he's like, and he like goes through this painstakingly long description, albeit just one sentence, but this painfully of what the Balrog is. Like, that's a demon from the other world. He's like, run. like, dude, I would have run 15 minutes ago. I would have got the fuck out of there. Like as soon as I saw like some like hear this daunting like, and then that light, that flame, and I hear that the breathing sounds of the Balrog, I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it's scaring
I don't need
away,
to know what it is.
I'm making like the elves and leaving. Like I'm out.
if it's scaring away the horde of goblins that is surrounding you, like, all right, this is probably something we need to get the hell away from.
Right. 100%. Oh god. Yeah, that whole thing just bothers me. Which is funny considering my answer to the final question of the evening. So final question, guys. Favorite scene. Fellowship of the Ring. What is it?
This was perhaps the toughest question on the agenda because there's a lot of really iconic scenes. I mean, some of them have been made into memes now, like we talked about with Boromir.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's like, and Second Breakfast, absolutely. Like the fight scenes are incredible, no doubt about it. They do a phenomenal job. But it's when Aragorn closes Frodo's hand around the ring right before this climactic battle begins. It's like, that's him passing the test that he's feared because his bloodline has failed it. And like the ring is literally called Isildur's Bane multiple times. It's like that's his bloodline. And he steps up to the challenge and he does it for the first time, probably in his life, because he's been running from becoming the king of Gondor his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that is my favorite scene in the whole movie.
Mine is I'm gonna give a runner up to the big fight scene at the end, because that fight scene with Aragorn just laying waste to those orcs is so awesome. But my favorite one is a very short scene where Pippin knocks that dwarf skeleton down the well,
Yes.
and then like everything but the kitchen sink just keeps falling down, and it just goes on for way longer than it has to, and I love it.
Fool of a took. Next time, throw yourself in, riddest of your stupidity.
And everyone is
Oh,
just
and they
standing
all
there,
take, like, a-
watching. That's great.
And like the one thing falls and they hear nothing, and then they all take a deep breath, like, oh, we're good,
Yeah,
we're good. And then everything else falls.
the chain and then the bucket, and
Yeah.
it's great.
Great. Talk about comedic relief, though. It did, like, Sean Bean's character, Baromir, like when they're closing up the door of that room, and then like he looks out the door and he almost gets shot with the arrow. And he's like, "They have a cave troll." Like, it's still one of my favorite lines. Still one of my favorite lines, even though I didn't mention it earlier. They have a cave troll. And you still don't know what they mean until like that fucking monster just pops its way through the doorway. It's like, oh shit, that's what a cave troll is. Got it. Leave it to always bad guys in films to like harness the evil of something, and like that where they have like they don't care about their own safety either. Like the cave troll is just like, killing probably just as many orcs as it is trying to kill the good guys.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I mean,
And that-
so he kills Frodo essentially, right? Like that's his only enemy kill, right? He kills more fucking orcs than he does of the people he's supposed to.
Way more.
It's true. It's hilarious. That reminds me of my runner-up scene. I almost forgot I wrote this down. Is the beginning before they get to Bree. It's like it's just the four hobbits. They're getting chased by all these Nazgul. What do they do right when they get to Bree? They get a beer.
They get a beer.
Yeah.
It's just the most human thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is that? Oh, it's a pint.
Comes in pints.
Pints?
I'm
getting one.
It's like, oh yeah, I feel like I would need a beer after that.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Love it. So my favorite scene is the secret council meeting, right? That's my favorite. Always will be, I think. Just Boromir's just become my favorite character, and I love that scene. I was talking earlier about like Gandalf's soul being taken from him when Frodo says he'll take the ring. Just unbelievable. I love it. But and from Tripp loves the last battle scene, where Aragorn's just taking out Uruk-hai left and right. I still love from the entertainment perspective. I still love as many nitpicks as there are in it. Like I still love the Mines of Moria battle scene.
Yeah, that whole sequence is awesome.
Yeah, like fucking Samwise like taking a cast iron to some Uruk's head and stuff. Like the Pippin and Merry like going balls out. Legolas is jumping on a cave troll. Gimli's avenging his family. Like, I mean, it's got everything in a 5-minute stretch of just, it's all, I don't know. From an entertainment value, it's terrific. It's absolutely terrific.
Oh, absolutely. And even like in The Hobbit, they introduced Balin, who's like the dwarf with the all white hair. It's kind of like the grandpa of the group.
Yeah.
It's like, that's his tomb. So it like going back to that scene, it's even more meaningful.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. No, good call, Sam. Good call. Good call. No. I love this film, gentlemen. I can't believe it's 20 years old. I just can't believe it. I mean, unbelievable.
It holds up so well that like watching it, if you had never heard of it and you lived in a bubble, you could show it to somebody and tell them it came out in 2019 and they would believe you.
Yeah, easily.
Absolutely.
Easily. There is a spoiler alert. We will not be doing The Hobbit on LOTR Takes. Just we won't be doing those films.
Yeah, if you asked me, I would have said no. Sorry, Jerry.
So, but on that note, I want to propose something. I say we come back next year, gentlemen, and we do 2 towers.
Yes.
Oh, without hesitation.
So the 3 of us, 2 towers, and we'll do the 20 years of the 2 towers. And I'm excited about that one because that's my favorite. That's my favorite of the 3. So I'm totally excited. And I already have like half the segment already laid out, so I don't even have to do notes. So good stuff, good times. So this is also something that we're going to continue on. So I started with doing this with the 30th anniversary Field of Dreams with Miguel Shodell a couple of years ago. And then we took it on again, invited Sam and Justin Andrews, and we did Gladiators 20th anniversary back in the fall. And Sam and I were talking offline, and was talking about doing something again. And I was like, hey, what was 20 years old? And we were going through some films, and I was like, hey, how do you feel about Ocean's 11? And Sam, I don't want to take words out of your mouth, but basically it'd been a while since you revisited it. And it's one of my favorite, Ocean's 11, the remake, the 2001 version, George Clooney, Brad Pitt. It's one of my favorite films. And so Sam revisited it, and Sam and I, and we'll probably get a third guest, we'll be doing Ocean's 11 later this year, celebrating 20 years of Ocean's 11. So really good thing. So we're going to continue this series a couple times a year. I think it's a lot of fun. Nice little break from the cigar industry, but we get to smoke cigars, hang out, and talk about some of the films from our our childhood and stuff like that, and adulthood in some cases. So I'm excited about this. And did I speak for you too soon, Sam? Are you still down to do Ocean's 11?
I'm 100% down. I mean, I think I texted you the picture when I was watching it. I was like, man, I forgot how great this movie was.
It's awesome.
It's just and the cast in that movie, it's unbelievable.
Oh,
that movie is a crazy cast.
Yeah, it's so sad to me that they basically put an end in it. Well, Bernie Mac passed away, and so did Carl Reiner at this point too. But like they're not going to bring it back. They're not going to bring back those guys, which stinks. To do another one, because I could have done an Ocean's 14, 15. I could have gone with that series. I loved the cast, and I love the stories, and it's great. So we'll be doing Ocean's 11 later this year, and we'll do the 2 towers next year. This same group, it'll be we'll try to make it. We'll maybe change up a couple things, keep building on this thing. But I'm really enjoying this. This has been a lot of fun, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for having us on. It's been a ton of fun, just to, even if we weren't even on air, just hanging out, talking about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Sam's line was like, I can do a Lord of the Rings all day, because we were talking about films, and I was like, perfect. I know the perfect guy to bring on. And I had another guy in mind, but he's actually celebrating his 23rd wedding anniversary tonight. Mr. Matt Ty of How About That Cigar would have been he would have brought some really cool. I think he would have really brought some good perspectives to this. So he's sorely missed, but we'll give him the pass. We'll give him the pass, celebrating his 23rd anniversary tonight.
Yeah, that's a good enough reason to pass up the show.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, guys, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up tonight. I really do appreciate everyone's likes, shares, and comments. Really do appreciate that. I appreciate everyone subscribing. Check out our Facebook page, the ELOSOFUMAR page, for a calendar of upcoming guests as well. We're 2 weeks away from the PCA trade show, so that's exciting. We'll be there representing ELOSOFUMARTAKES and working with the Cigar Coop team to bring back some of the best coverage of the annual trade show that, well, isn't annual because we didn't have one last year, but we're excited to go back to Vegas and dive into the industry. We are going to be talking about the trade show next week. Ben Lee, now of Cigar Coop, who's part of the Cigar Coop team, and Garrett Robinson, speaking of How About That Cigar, will be on my show next week. We'll be talking about the upcoming trade show and what we expect there. So be sure to check out our YouTube page as well as Fumar. You can hit the subscribe button. But if you are listening to this later, whether you subscribe, you listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, or wherever you listen to podcasts, be sure you download, subscribe, and hit that review button as well. And if you already are a subscriber, please hit the unsubscribe button, but please don't forget to resubscribe. That really helps my numbers and allows me to continue to get great guests like the gentleman who joined me this evening. So for all of you out there, thanks for hanging out with us, man. We celebrated the 20th anniversary of Lord of the Rings. This was our 174th take. Live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star studio of Euless, Texas. I'm your host, Barry Duplessis, as always. And guess what, everybody? See you next time.